Before we start proceedings, there is no expected fire alarm today. Therefore, if the alarm does sound, please treat it as real. Follow the signs to the nearest exit, and we can. The fire assembly point is out by the Cafe Roma in the Civic Square. Can I ask that you use your microphone when addressing the meeting, and it's switched off when you're not using it, and your mobiles are on silent. As you will be familiar with, the meeting is broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewings. By entering the waterspout room and during the course of the meeting, councillors are consenting to being filmed and to the use of those recordings for webcasting. And in particular, those repeated viewings, those who watch this in the future, if they are confused, it is Christmas and we see a jumper, Councillor Ricketts, who out-trumps you in terms of yours blouse, Hannah. But thank you for getting into the spirit, Councillor Ricketts. Hannah, do we have any apologies?
Through you, Chair, we don't have any apologies, but Councillors McCarthy and Allen have informed us they're both running late, but they will be attending.
Thank you. Great. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest, members? That's great, thank you. Item 3 are the minutes. I'm sure you've all given these a thorough read. Any amendments or edits? Any suggestions from members? No, great. I'll sign those as an accurate record. Thank you. Item number 4, Chair's urgent business. I've not been appraised of any. Thank you, Hannah. And then item number 5, straight into economic insight and intelligence. And I believe, Anna, you're presenting this item. Warm welcome to the leader, David Draffin. Anyone else involved in this item? Thank you, Amanda. Leader, do you want to introduce? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and compliments to the season to you. I'm sorry that I haven't dressed up for the occasion, but you know, yeah, I didn't get the memo. So this committee's had many short updates from officers in economic development regarding intelligence and insight, because it provides evidence and understanding to make informed recommendations, right? That's why we do it. Now, in the past, we've set out what the statistics are telling us about the city, how these statistics vary across the city, and what is different about Plymouth compared with national trends. Now, we use this insight and intelligence to make sure that we lobby for the right resources to help address inequalities, to look at where we need to spend our funds, which will make a real difference to people who live in the city. Now, today, officers are going to have a bit of a deep dive into one of the areas which is dear to my heart, which is inclusive growth. Now, this presentation is looking at some of the knottier economic issues. You'll hear today, it's not just about creating jobs, it's about making sure that local people can access those jobs. How do we make sure that the opportunities and wealth generation impacts everybody? And what are the barriers to people getting those jobs? It's well known that wealth is intrinsically linked to health and vice versa. Now, the team's going to talk through the differences in deprivation across the city, alongside things like caring responsibilities and health, okay? And you'll see that this is highly complex. So I'm going to bring in at this point Anna Peachy, whose first ever scrutiny meeting this is, after 14 years. This is the first time you've asked to see her. So I hope you enjoy this, because I have to say, you know, Anna and her team are the unsung heroes of the economic development team, right? And so this is a really good opportunity to get in and underneath the floorboards on a really important piece of our work. Over to you.
Thanks, Tudor. Good afternoon. So the paper I've given you has got lots of background to it, but I'm going to do a very brief summary so that you've got time for conversation. So next slide, thank you. So in July, my colleagues gave you an overview of the economic intelligence statistics, and they presented this slide, which shows the difference in pay between residents and workers in the city, so that the worker wages include people who commute in from outside the city, and also the difference in full-time and part-time, and shows the trend in growth of wages of the lowest paid 20% and the 80th percentile, which is basically the bottom of the highest paid 20%. And so that provides a good background for this presentation, because what we're trying to understand is who does the economy work for, who doesn't it work for, and why, what might be the challenges and barriers for people. Next slide, please. So what I really want to get across in this summary is that there are three distinct groups that the inclusive growth pillar of the economic strategy is really focused on. So there's the people in our deprived communities, and then there's people with caring responsibilities and health challenges. And obviously behind that is what we call the intersectionality of all of the protected characteristics. So you'll probably be familiar with protected characteristics of race and sexuality and gender, and there's 9 in total. But what we see in Plymouth is there are kind of particularly high numbers and kind of very clear challenges around these three. And as we understand those, we also need to pick up and obviously make sure that we're addressing the further complexities that those other characteristics can bring in for people as they try to access and prosper from the economy in Plymouth. Next slide, please. So you might be familiar with this map of Plymouth. It shows the indices of deprivation, which are graded from 1 to 10 for kind of each decile across the country. So the dark red are the most deprived, and the dark blue are the least deprived. And what we see in Plymouth is that we've got 28 of what we call lower super output areas. So they are sub-neighbourhoods. And we've got 28 of those that are in the lowest 10% in England in terms of deprivation. Next slide, please. And what that actually tells us is that there's a score that is made up of 7 different domains, and there's some subdomains in there as well. So we understand exactly why those neighbourhoods are in those deprivation deciles. And so in terms of economic development, the ones that are kind of particularly pertinent to us are income, employment and skills. So income is looking at the number of people who are in poverty, and he also looks at children in poverty and older people in poverty as subdomains. Employment looks at the number of people who are in employment or economically inactive. I should say, when it comes to unemployment, we count those people as economically active, but on a low income. So that's kind of covered under income rather than employment. Employment is about whether or not they are employed. And then education is skills. And although our team aren't the lead on adult skills, we work very closely with the adult skills team. And then obviously the others, health, crime, barriers to housing and services, and living environment, you know, we're kind of very aware of and work closely with the teams who do have more impact, more direct impact on those. Next slide, please. So I didn't provide this in the paper, but this shows you economic inactivity, and this is where we particularly understand what's going on with people for whom the labour market is particularly difficult to access. And this goes back to 2005, and you can see this is a total number, so a fluctuation in the total number of people who are economically inactive. So they're not in work and they're not looking for work. The yellow band you might be able to see is particularly big and has grown over recent years, that's the people who are long-term sick. And the orange band is the people who are looking after family and home. So that corresponds to people with health challenges and caring responsibilities. But this gives us an indication of those for whom actually taking work is a particular challenge as opposed to the challenges of being in work. Next slide, please. So just looking at the caring responsibilities, I've given you quite a lot of information in the report about male-female economic statistics. For me, this is the particularly pertinent one because this is people who are employed in the city by gender and their wages. And that green line at the bottom is female wages. And you can see it's very much lower than the male wages. And if we can compare it to benchmarks like the real living wage and the national living wage, on a weekly income basis, women's wages in the city are very low. The next slide, please. And so since I did the paper, I've pulled out for you a comparison of those two benchmarks from Plymouth, the Southwest and Great Britain. So you can see that the percentage of women who are paid below the national living wage is higher in Plymouth than it is in the Southwest and Great Britain. And similarly for the real living wage, it's higher in Plymouth than it is in the Southwest and Great Britain. So that says to us that there's something going on in Plymouth's economy that we really need to understand, why we've got so many people with caring responsibilities, 90% of whom are women, on low wages. Next slide, please. And then this is a similar comparison just between Great Britain and Plymouth of the proportion of our population, working age population with health conditions. And you can see that nationally, the grey bars, it has increased in recent years, but in Plymouth, it's quite a bit higher. The scale on the left-hand side for this actually starts at 4.5% to just exaggerate that so you can read it. But still, I think nationally it's about 5 point something percent of the working age population, and in Plymouth it's over 9%. So again, something going on in Plymouth that we really need to work with our businesses and understand how we make work more accessible for them. So that's just an overview of those three audiences. And hopefully the paper has given you a good insight into exactly, where those issues are between part-time and full-time work and economic activity and inactivity, so those in work and those who are out of work and not looking for work. So I'm open to questions.
Was there anything further before members come in, David?
Yeah, if I can. I suspect it'll come up in the questioning, Anna, but obviously it's worth just pointing out that for the first time in the economic strategy, this work stream is now mainstreamed in our economic plan for this very purpose. So I know you will, through questioning, because the obvious question that what you have just said that will be begged is, and what is our response? So I just wanted to tell people that there is a strand. It's one of four, and one's cross-cutting, and Anna will be able to, with us, unpack some of that detail because there's a lot we are doing.
Councillor Rainsford.
If I could follow up on that very useful and very interesting, slightly depressing at times presentation. I've recently met with a social enterprise CIC called Iridescent Ideas, who work specifically with women who want to set up businesses. They've got something like 240 on their books, and they've got over 40 of those into a business to the point where they're paying taxes now. That's quite a good turnaround. I just wondered what we as a council were doing to link up with the voluntary sector, the social enterprises in the city, to help boost particularly women a lot of the women they work with have caring responsibilities, so it hits your target in that respect, and to support organisations like that.
Yeah, so the She project that Iridescent are part of is actually funded through the Shared Prosperity Fund from the council. We've always made sure that there is funding for social enterprise support, which is what that is. It's one of the things that the Plymouth is really good at, being a social enterprise city. Some other areas of the council and DWP as well that we work closely with also provide employability support through organisations, very often charities and social enterprises that work with those members of the community. Real Ideas, for example, is another partner in that programme. And then we work with the businesses as well so that they understand what the issues are for the women that they employ.
Thank you. Councillor Bannerman.
Thank you, Chair. There's a part in the pact regarding paternity leave. We talk a lot about care and responsibilities and that being the woman's role. Actually, there's two carers for most children. When you think of nurseries, they often phone mum first. Any kind of child care setting, they often phone mum first. If we're making changes right at the beginning, at paternity leave, then are we not then making changes throughout that child's life and making a caring responsibility a parent's role, not just a mum's role, and that then supporting women going into middle and higher class, higher earning spheres, rather than them being the one that stays at home with their child?
Yeah, precisely. That was why we included that section about some of the kind of national policy work that's coming out of the current government, because we can see that there is that shift, and it's why we as a team decided to call it caring responsibilities rather than just focusing on women, because it is 90% women, but actually we're very keen that those responsibilities do become a bit more gender neutral, and I think, you know, whoever is primary carer for the children, if they do it kind of exclusively in a family, we need to recognise that they will have those challenges in the workplace. So you don't want to end up with unintended consequences by getting more of the kind of male parents to pick up those roles and then find that they're in low pay, part-time roles as well. So yeah, absolutely. But I think if that comes nationally and it's recognised by some of our businesses locally as well, it will change the dynamic a lot. Good question, thank you.
Thank you. I was going to pick up on what Councillor Bannerman said there. I know we just said it's about 90% of females staying at home, but the last time I checked, it was closer to about 2% of men are the stay-at-home parents. Now, I think the knock-on from that is why we could have such a discrepancy moving forwards. And so I'm really interested to see what are we doing as a council to try and encourage more men to be the stay-at-home parents. And I think that would have a greater sense in the long-term side of things of getting, I wouldn't say more accurate figures, I'd say more fair figures, hopefully, in the future.
Yeah, so some of you might be aware of the Plymouth Charter and the network of businesses that we work with through the Charter. They sign up to say that they're committed to a fairer, greener future for Plymouth. We've got about 380 signatories at the moment, which gives us a critical mass to really understand precisely what businesses are doing. And we as a council are one of those signatories. And just since the summer, through the work that Babcock have really brought forward, the four biggest employers in the city, which is us, the University of Plymouth, the hospital and Babcock have been meeting monthly and having just those conversations. So, you know, between those four employers, it's 25,000 employees plus the students. Very large spend, gives them a lot of leverage, I guess, with local suppliers as well. So that's where we have those conversations, and all of those organisations now have their own intelligence like this about their own workforces, trying to understand exactly what these challenges are for their own workforces. So that's where a lot of my team's efforts and the support of the wider team goes to trying to address those issues.
Thank you. I have two questions, but maybe I can do one as a supplementary. Thank you, Anna. That was really good and really great to have you in front of the committee today. A really great presentation. I'm really interested. I think these reports are really useful, great statistics, and you know, we should always have kind of evidence-led policy in what we do. Are you able to give any specific examples, of that's you or the others presenting, of where you've seen these reports and you've changed something or something's happened differently? So I'm just trying to understand how we make sure this isn't just a report on the shelf, but are there any recent examples of where you've gone, that's changed, that's different, and you've made an intervention as a result?
Yeah, I mean, over the last few years, there have been quite a few. I suppose the biggest change that we've made is changing the conversation. As David said, just making sure that inclusive growth is one of the four pillars in the economic strategy, making sure that those three audiences are at the heart of that pillar, so that we're understanding priorities, because obviously protected characteristics do tend to be a big issue in the city, something that the council takes a lot of care to make sure that people feel included, and the welcoming city agenda. So that changing the conversation and making sure we understand the priorities, I would say, has been a big change over the last 20 years or so. But in terms of individual businesses, we've seen an increased number of businesses join the disabled employer network and change the way that they recruit. And some of our charter signatories have joined that and have become more vocal and have become championing disability employment as a result of that network. And we've given them the chance to meet other people who want to do more of that work. In terms of particularly the women's groups, we've seen a change not actually a change at this stage. Obviously, there's been a big focus on violence against women and girls, but we've been able to go into those organisations and say, look at the economics behind that and how poor, how low the income is for a lot of women in the city, so that we're helping them to understand some of the inequalities and poverty behind what they're doing as well. So it's changing conversations as well as changing the practices within the businesses.
Can I just add a couple of things? So just one example relating to this agenda and one more generally. So I think one of the really good examples was COVID recovery in terms of your specific question, and that was recognised in the recent PwC Good Growth Index, where we were the #1 city in the UK for recovering post-COVID in good growth. So what we at least managed to do is maintain our position in COVID, whereas a lot of cities got worse through COVID. So the recovery, the work of Resurgam, that was nationally recognised. I think the other agenda here is that we, over the last 15 years, have spent a lot of time on creating employment opportunities. And, if we go back, I can remember many conversations about driving growth in sectors, that's defence, marine, construction. We've done that now. So what we've ended up with is a situation where we've got, we've created 7,000 jobs of full employment. So actually, in terms of shifting the dial, we've almost shifted it too far. Clearly we haven't, because you can't. But now what we're transferring is we have a different situation. Clearly we want to grow the economy, we want to create the conditions for growth and investment. But what we absolutely need to focus on is making sure we can get those jobs filled, and they're filled by our citizens, our young people, as well as importing new talent. So I think there is a shift in the agenda, but we've created that opportunity, because had we not done the work over the last 10 years and we'd had static growth, we'd be sitting here going, well, we don't have any jobs and we have full employment. It's all just completely, it's just the seesaw's flat. Whereas what we've done is we've created the investment stimulus at an extraordinarily pace and scale, almost in every sector. And the point that is interesting is we need it all. We need our young people to perform. We need more educational opportunities. We need to remove the barriers to work. We need to remove access to work and all of that stuff. But we've also got a lot of people who are economically inactive. And if we don't address, and Anna will correct me on the percentage, but it's 20s and 30s, isn't it? Percent. I think it's quite a high percentage of those who are economically inactive in our labour market. And if we can get those people back into our labour market, that will create a huge opportunity. So this agenda, I think, has suddenly become, well, it's not suddenly because we've been working on it for 5-6 years, but there is a shift, but we've created the opportunity. So I think in terms of answering your question, is it just reports? No, we've created the investment, and now we've got something, we've got a tangible prize to chase.
Thank you. I'll ask my follow-up briefly. The report obviously has a big focus on deprivation and getting people into work, has a focus on one of the things you're trying to achieve is around RQT level 4+ qualifications. I just observed in the report there's I didn't see a focus, and forgive me if I missed it, on digital skills. 1 in 5 people nationally lack the digital skills that they need to get on and have sort of more basic level jobs. And I know there are a number of statistics that suggest this has been an issue in Plymouth in the past. Can I ask how you're assessing Plymouth's kind of digital literacy base against some of the indicators you've looked at in this report? And if they're not the right people to ask, I understand, but I think there is, this is a trend that's only accelerating, so it'd be good to understand your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's the skills team that look at specific skills and, through the age range and key stages. But a lot of the organisations that we work for example, Real Ideas, do a lot of work with all age ranges in the community to encourage people to come in and understand, the digital work environment and the kinds of jobs that are available, make sure there's interest and aspiration. And then the skills teams will work very closely with organisations like that to make sure that there is skills provision, that it's well supported in schools in terms of careers advice and education, and then also that in the community that there's plenty of examples of businesses going into schools and talking about what the jobs are like, so that we're raising aspiration as well.
So one of the things I hope our digital champion will do when they are announced is to look at this very issue. I mean, if you there's a whole piece in the new emerging economic plan with a skills base which underpins all 4 pillars, and digital literacy is going to be a fundamental part of that. I think it's going to be worth looking at that in the context of our educational performance as well, because although we've got most of our schools now are good or excellent, in terms of their qualifications, they leave something to be desired. So I think there's a piece there of conversation with, for example, Councillor Cresswell, which might be pursued as well, about how that's been tackled that way, and also through HE, and how that's been looked at as well. So maybe I could throw that back at you, Vice Chair, and to have a think about how this panel could actually support that work and come forward with some proposals for us to look at, if that's not too forward.
No, it's a very proper suggestion. It's a two-way conversation, this process. I'm grateful for that. Prior to this meeting, we were looking at the agenda for the next few meetings for next year, and that's part of our future skills program in February. So, yeah, we had that conversation earlier, but thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Ricketts. Ho, ho, ho.
Thank you, Chair. Great report, really insightful stats on the economy of Plymouth. One of the things that there was some recent publication of immigration statistics that the last 2 million people that came into this country, only 1 in 5 were actually economically active, were actually working. Do we track that in relation to Plymouth? Because I don't see that in the reports on how we report on that.
Yeah, so the kind of immigration isn't one of the kind of three, but it does come into those protected characteristics and how those are part of particularly the deprived communities and contributing. There's a lot of intersectionality, for example, around race and ethnicity. There's a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration. So obviously the illegal immigrants and asylum seekers wouldn't have work visas until they have the right to remain. But there's also quite high immigration in order to take roles. So employers, there is a scheme for employers to support immigration to fill roles, and particularly the NHS has always been excellent at doing that, and we have a really good track record of supporting people who come into the city, making them sure they're welcome, making sure that they're really maxing out their economic activity. But that's down to kind of national. What we can do is make sure that they're welcome and that their families are supported. The kind of who which businesses do that and under what scheme is under national legislation and policy.
It'd be good, I know it's a complicated issue, it'd be good to get some sort of breakdown on, as David alluded to, the 20-30% inactivity, economically inactive, what a further breakdown in relation to the immigration side of things, just so we get an understanding of how we can help and boost our economy.
Okay, I'll have a look.
Thank you. Lauren, Councillor Mackay.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report and welcome to Scrutiny, Anna. I think there is a bit of a story to celebrate in here, and that's around youth unemployment and the reductions that have been made there. And I think that's a real story to celebrate. And I think there's a piece in here around that unlocking Plymouth's potential report and the really good work that's been done in that area. And I'm wondering if there's any lessons that we can take from the success of that targeted action through that report and apply those learnings to any other places, such as long-term sick, care leavers, women.
I suppose yes is the short answer. What we find with some of the work that we've done to support youth employment over the years and long-term unemployed as well is that a personal approach, because everybody's situation is different. And I think that's very much the case also with health conditions and caring responsibilities and what other issues are related to deprivation, things like transport and childcare support and all of those kinds of things. So yes, that kind of more personalised approach, and we are seeing that happening, particularly around health conditions. I think around caring responsibilities, there's a lot of change nationally, looking at the provision of childcare, the availability of flexible working, so some of those things that are coming out of the Employment Rights Bill. So I think there's a mixture of approaches, some of which are person-centred and some of which are looking at policy.
Please, thanks, Judah.
You've got Jemima Lang's coming later to talk about culture, I think. But it would be worth having her speak to you at some point, probably not today because it wouldn't be fair because she's not expecting it, but, you know, the work we're doing on care leavers, and making sure that we try and fill gaps in CVs for care leavers in particular. I think that might be worth exploring, Lauren, to be honest. I think we've been commended for the work we're doing on care leavers at the moment, but nationally, so it'd be worth hearing a bit more about that, I think.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your question, and you're right. I mean, it's easy to forget we had really high youth employment, didn't we? I think it was 30% some time ago, and we worked really hard on that. And I think that was all I was going to allude to. So I think one my experiences in these places, there's always a qualitative and a quantitative response. So the scale response with young people was that at the time, there was such a national model about programs to get young people into work. It was just such a mess, and no one could really figure out. The businesses couldn't figure out which program would work, and we provided a brokerage service which would just simplified it, which was challenging 1,000 businesses take 1,000 opportunities. Well, each business might take 10, 20 or 50. So that was the large scale approach, and that was the fog lifting, if you like. But what you'll also find is that once you get to those people who are furthest away from the labour market, you need a qualitative individual approach, and that's expensive because you're generally having to do one-on-one care. And one of the things that I think the city hasn't had for a long time, probably since the EU money's dried up, is large-scale revenue programs in those spaces. And I think that's something that we'll always keep asking for, is that there's always capital programs, but if you're going to shift the dial in those groups, you do need the long-term revenue programs. And the example you've just given earlier, Anna, of we've had really small amounts of shared prosperity funding, £1-2 million, but the impact is profound because actually you're moving on 40, 50 people. So I think in terms of learning, I think there's always a large scale response, but then you've got to do the hard yards, and that's kind of what Anna's doing is the hard yards. So it might be small in scale, but it's profound in impact, and we've just got to keep doing that and keep searching for the funding, keep being noisy about it. And I think lots of local authorities around the country wouldn't have space for this conversation; they wouldn't be doing it. So I think it's a credit to Anna and the elected members to create space for it. We've just got to keep pushing.
And the other thing to say, of course, is we have this massive boulder of opportunity or worry coming down the track in terms of the dockyard expansion, where we require 5,500 workers. Now, one of the things that we're arguing with government about right now is getting a big slab of cash in to try and turn some of those young people, well, a lot of those young people, into dockyard workers, frankly. And we'll want to do that and sustain that over a period of time. Some of that starts with, though, making sure, I think somebody mentioned this already, there's too many of our young people come out of school without decent qualifications, and we've got to try and do something profoundly different about that. And again, it's that conversation that we've got to have through the education service about what we're doing and making sure those kids come out with being able to do something. If we look at the conversation we were having the other day with Babcock, is in order to get some of the apprentices with Babcock, you've got to pass quite a high bar. And sometimes the question is, do you need that? Do you need to be able to write a beautiful essay at English GCSE level in order to get in as an apprentice? Is there some difference that we might be able to apply in order to make sure that those opportunities can be grasped? So these conversations are happening again right now, in the hope that we can continue to keep the downward pressure on those numbers.
That's great. Anna, do you want to come in briefly? I've got one more question and then we can wrap this agenda item up. Thank you.
Yeah, just to there's kind of almost joining the circle to also bring in issues around school readiness and the early years education. So often it's women's wages that pay for the extras around the childcare support. So making sure that our children are going into school ready to learn with good communication skills so that they're gaining those qualifications has been recognised now at a national level, but it's also being picked up by some of our employers in the city, particularly where they've got very high dominance of male workforce, and looking at so what would we need to do to make sure that we've got women who are able to access childcare, but children who are also accessing early years education so that they're starting school on the front foot. So that's where hopefully, as David said, those kind of national programmes that are creating revenue for us, and we can use this intelligence to put our hands in the air and say, you know, Plymouth is absolutely ready to take on this challenge. We know we've got employers involved. We know what we want to do.
Thank you. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. It's okay. Most of my concerns were qualitative and quantitative, and they've been dealt with. Thank you.
I'm really grateful. It's to pick up on Lauren's point and the response provided in terms of what can we learn. Youth unemployment was always stubbornly high for so long, so that's a great example to say that's exactly what we've learned. But I fully appreciate each case is different, and how can we apply that lesson? Can I just before we close this, the long-term inactive sick statistics that you provided, it's 2023 is the last year that we're looking at. Is that indicative of how 2024 is going, or is it too early to say? Is this trend continuing? Are you able to give us that information at this stage?
And these are decade entrenched problems here. So I think, you know, I think we've got, if you look at the barriers to work, Plymouth just stands out as having these long-term issues. And I think we can probably muse that some of these are to do with our industrial backgrounds, and that's one issue, and probably a lot of it is to do with mental health issues, probably coming from low wages and the associated things. So I think it's fair to say we can anticipate that's a stubborn trend that we've got to do, and a lot of the work that we do links across to good housing, good health, and it's the whole trinity. If people have a good job and a good home, you know, and a good employment, then generally life's good. And that's why, you know, I think it's probably fair to say, Tudor, that's kind of been the mission for such a long time. If we can get good employment, then everything flows from that. So I think that's yeah, it's a long-term endeavour here.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Really insightful, Anna. Great to have you here. It's absolutely shameful that we haven't had you here in this time. We'll make sure you're added to the agenda as frequently as possible. But thank you so much. It's been really interesting and quite an insightful exercise. Committee, we're asked to note the report. It's duly noted. Thank you very much for attending. And we'll just allow a minute for a quick reshuffle, because I think most of you are staying for the next item. Thank you. So we'll allow you just to reshuffle there and reorganise nameplates, and then we can commence. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're now on agenda item number 6, Freeport annual update. I think everybody's familiar with the end of the table. I don't think we need to do introductions, or shall we? I think we all have nameplates, so we'll just crack on. Leader, I think you're going to introduce this item.
Indeed. Now look, I know that free ports are controversial for some people. So I suppose I need to start by explaining why our free port is different. Ours is about additionality and growth, not just substitution or moving stuff around. Okay. Our free port has commitment to good growth. We've heard a little bit about what that means earlier on. It's not about, in our case, it's not about deregulating anything. It's not about cross-cutting or corner cutting. Our free port is about delivering our existing city strategy, which means supporting defence and marine business. That's pretty much what we're about, okay? Now, already, through the free port, we've secured £25 million in capital funding. And as I explained, I think at council last week, we were the first free port to spend our money. We're not the only one. This is another free port has actually spent theirs as well, but we were the first. Yeah, I mean, what does that mean? Well, it means £80 million worth of retained rates towards our city agenda, so that's really good. So we've been doing quite well over the last 12 months. We've enabled ABP to complete £23 million worth of port improvements, which is driving net zero and also increasing the exports through that port, which is terrific. We've supported Catwater Harbour Commissioners with their channel widening project, and that's going to enable larger, greener vessels to come in and out of our port. It's fantastic. I mean, not a lot of people know this, but shipping's actually is the greenest of all the transport methodology per tonne. And if you ever get the chance to get Richard Allen from Catwater to come in and talk to you about that at some point, it's quite fascinating. Anyway, I digress. We've supported Princess Yachts to enable a production of a new line of yachts for them. I know we've heard a little bit of bad news about them, but actually the plans for Princess are going that way. £7 million for the Ocean Gate Innovation Barns, which I am excited beyond measure about that because I have absolutely no idea what they are. But they will create about 50 new jobs by the end of 2025. So perhaps we'll hear a bit more about them in a minute. £8 million Language South direct development has started on site. You may see a little hint of that in a moment. And the Babcock Jackal production facility has started. I mean, that's quite exciting. We had a tour of it last week, didn't we? Was it last week? Last Friday, I think. We took the growth board in. 70 of these vehicles been ordered by the British Army, and there's a second order of 53. That's created 90 new jobs in a free port, and it's a fascinating production to see that. Working closely, of course, on flow, floating offshore wind. We've had conversations, the free port's had conversations with the council and also with Crown Estate, who got a bit of an interest. I think they own the seabed or something. Anyway, it's that sort of thing. The MHCLG, the government department that has to, I call it audit, has signed us off as being quite good, actually. That was quite pleasing. We've agreed terms to secure employment land at Sherford, which is super. a £7 million innovation fund has been secured for the maritime launch pad, and we've held 20 major business events already in various locations through the Freeport area, involving other local authorities as well, I think, our partners. Now, unlike some Freeports, I shan't mention which ones, we are delivering, as I say, real added value. We're creating extra jobs, and the Freeport's a major part of our growth alliance to maximise the Devonport opportunity that I've talked about before. And just to remind you once again, that Devonport piece is really important. We must keep mentioning it because it's worth £4.5 billion investment to the city with a 50-year pipeline. It means, as I mentioned in the last item, 5,500 new recruits and 2,000 construction workers in defence alone, and this unprecedented demand for skills and housing demand. Now, you know, it's important to keep mentioning this in the context of Freeport, because Freeport's going to support that effort. You know, it's really important to say that it's one of those things that we must keep mentioning, because there aren't many places in the country that have got a 50-year certainty around economic support from the government, right? And we have now with the Devonport deal. I think got a bit of a slideshow for you, haven't you?
Thanks, Judah, and afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to update you on the Freeport this year. And thanks to Rob and James, who are going to update you all on the 2 direct developments that the Plymouth City Council have in the Freeport area. Next slide, please. Now that we have a new government in place, progress on 3 particular net zero enabling projects, along with the wider C. Yearly, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government audit all Freeports, including ours, through the annual performance review. Our maturity of the organisation and its Governor District Council, who together hold reserved matters on all the key decisions affecting our Freeport in Plymouth. And so this year was ongoing from all Freeports, with guiding businesses in the area, nationally and overseas, more time as part of that lobbying, enabling businesses in advanced manufacturing, engineering and net zero technologies to invest. All of this has been endorsed by the new Labour government's support of Freeports and its intent to align the UK Freeport programme with its emerging 10-year industrial strategy, which will be published early next year in this area, and is utilising Freeport status to drive cleaner growth, with port funding has contributed to the reinforcement of West Wharf. This is the first piece of a big jigsaw to enable net zero port status at Mill Bay. Next slide, please. And as we heard from Tudor just a minute ago, at Catwater, Plymouth City, as accountable body, awarded £382,000 to the Harbour Commissioners to create a deeper channel for greener hybrid ships of the future. Next slide, please. And into the 2030s, those very same hybrid ships may well benefit from the Langage Green Hydrogen Hub. This past year, Carlton Power secured hydrogen allocation round 1 funding from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero for 10 megawatts of 100% green hydrogen fuel. This will be built on plot 4 of the Langage tax site and will be operational in 2027, subject to contract with government. Next slide, please. Across all Freeport tax sites, the Sea Capital programme is gathering pace to set the foundations for good growth. In summary, this includes at South Yard, the final phase of Oceans Gate, which James will report on in a moment, and a Princess Yachts Factory extension, alongside the 2 port optimisation projects already mentioned, both of which have completed in this reporting year. Next slide, please. The remaining Sea Capital projects are located at Langage, to the north of the A38, and Sherford to the south, to enable development of both tax sites, which already were identified as employment land in the joint local plan. Next slide, please. At Langage, we have a second direct development from Plymouth City, and Rob will give more detail on that in a moment. The rest of the projects are infrastructure investments, namely an access road to plot 2 and power connection to plots 2 and 3, led by Carlton Power. A 2-phase spine road led by Devon County. This will unlock land south of the power station. And a pedestrian cycle bridge led by Devon County also to provide an active travel link to the Sherford new community. Next slide, please. While at Sherford, a land assembly project led by South Hams District Council will secure the tax site for Freeport purposes, and a road and utilities project led by the Sherford Consortium will provide access and power to the tax site. Next slide, please. And I'll now hand over to James and then Rob to just do a deep dive on the 2 direct developments that Plymouth City are delivering.
Thank you, Ian. So the Oceansgate project has been running during the course of the last year. We've designed a scheme that is low carbon and comprises 2 blocks of industrial units. We submitted to planning in September, and we've been promised our decision this side of Christmas, so we've just got another week or so to wait for that. And we're also in the process of procuring a contractor to pick the project up. We're hoping that we will probably get to start demolition in February or March of next year and follow on with the main construction running through 2025 and into the early part of 26 for completions. One of the interesting things we've done is to make the scheme very low carbon, and we've just had an update on our embodied carbon monitoring. We benchmarked the scheme against an earlier phase of Oceansgate, where we built traditional steel-framed, metal-clad sheds. And our new proposal is achieving embodied carbon 70% lower than the old version. So it's really interesting to see what you can do when you're building what everybody views as tin sheds. And as the leader has referred, we're starting to call these buildings the barns, because the big thing we've done is we've moved from a steel frame to a timber frame. And we've changed the cladding on the outside from metal to timber. And this makes a huge difference when you're counting carbon. So I think that's going to be quite a success. And we've just started talking about how to incorporate some green terms into the leases to make sure our incoming tenants maintain that low energy approach and low carbon approach to their operations in the buildings when they're occupied. I'm pleased to say we've also got a number of inquiries and have commenced a pre-let discussion with one tenant who's looking to take 3 out of the 8 units that we're building. So it's a good picture at the moment, and I hope that next year is as successful as this year has been.
Yeah, no, thank you, James, and hopefully continuing that positive news story really with Langage South. And what I would like to say first of all is that Langage South actually follows on from a large number of projects delivered directly by Plymouth City Council successfully over the last few years. So this is a continuation of what we've done previously. And I'm delighted to say, as you can see from the picture there, we started on site with this project last week. So we've already secured planning consent, and the contractor, Devon Contractors, was appointed in early November and made a start on site last week. Okay, of which Tudor, I think you attended last week, didn't you? And did a groundbreaking exercise there to deliver some PR on the scheme. Tudor, you mentioned a moment ago, it's an £8 million project. £4 million of that is seed capital through the Freeport, and the remaining £4 million is direct investment from Plymouth City Council. So that's a large chunk of cash going into delivering this scheme. The scheme itself comprises the development of about 50,000 square feet of high quality, sustainable employment space with integrated offices and welfare facilities. And they're going to be split across 4 different size units to try and attract a range of different occupiers to the facilities. These are being built on a speculative basis, so we're hoping that over the course of the next few months we will start to talk about letting these units ready for when they're completed. The units are being targeted to the key sectors as set out by the Freeport, so that's advanced manufacturing, defence, marine, amongst others. And hopefully, when fully let, we forecast that the scheme should support around 138 jobs, which kind of links nicely back to the comment, the presentation we had earlier on about job creation and trying to provide a good quality range of jobs for the people of Plymouth. In terms of sustainability, obviously that's quite a key focus and priority for us. We've made sure that the building has included solar PV, increased levels of insulation, natural daylighting, natural ventilation, LED lighting and electric heating, which is fed off the solar PV. And we are currently exploring the benefits and possibilities of incorporating battery solar technology into the scheme as well, all of which will will reduce running costs, hopefully for the occupiers. We've also incorporated showers and cycle storage for people that want to walk, cycle to work. And we've also included EV charging pods into the scheme for the ever-increasing number of EV vehicles that we see on our roads at the moment. In terms of further sustainability, we're currently targeting BREEAM Excellent on the scheme, which is an accredited sustainability tool used by a range of people, and that will then give us an accreditation, hopefully of an excellent rating, so one of the highest ratings we can get on that. We're also targeting EPC A ratings, so that goes back to the operational performance of the building and the makeup of the building, and again will help to minimise running costs for occupiers. And we're also targeting net zero carbon for the scheme as well. Okay. Completion of this scheme, we started on site last week. We're looking at completion in autumn of 2025, so about 9-10 months' time. And following the press release that only went out this week, we've already started to receive inquiries. We did release a brochure back in October, from which we've also received a number of interested parties expressing interest in the scheme. So we're actively working with a number of companies at the moment to see if we can get some early lettings on board. Okay. So yeah, that's just a brief overview of Langage.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, James. Next slide. Thank you. So 2 great examples of Plymouth City Council providing high quality supply of property to match the demand from businesses which wish to grow within the Freeport. And as we've heard, demand is indeed growing, particularly through our business growth team, led by our Business Growth Investment Director, who's instigated a range of initiatives this past year since joining the Freeport in collaboration with local authority trade and investments teams across the partnership, plus colleagues in central government at the Department for Business and Trade. And as you can see from the highlights listed on the slide, this encompasses local, national and international business engagement. Next slide, please. The Babcock Supercat production facility that was mentioned by Tudor in his intro signifies early success and is an exemplar of good growth in a defence context. Indeed, the 90 new jobs created, out of those 90, 11 people were offered roles following a Skills Work Academy programme led by Babcock in partnership with DWP and Plymouth City. Next slide, please. And there is much more to come in 2025, including deepening collaboration with Plymouth City Council, MOD, University of Plymouth and others to develop the city's defence and floating offshore wind propositions, aligning the Freeport, as we mentioned earlier, to the emerging industrial strategy, completing the 2 direct developments that you heard about from Rob and James just now, and securing tenants for both sites, and moving forward with all the key seed capital infrastructure investments at Langage and Sherford. Next slide, please. So lots of progress made in the last year, with plenty to look forward to next year. And James, Rob and myself would be happy to answer any questions that you may have now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really very interesting presentation. And I recall Langage Phase 1, that was speculative as well, and that did incredibly well, as did Ocean Gate. So it's great to see that that interest is already there as we're embarking on these further stages. Councillor McCarthy, you were first.
Thank you, yes. Really interesting to hear. I guess I need to pick up on what Tudor said, innovation barns. And picking up on that point, you know, he mentioned, you know, what actually happens inside, and you've kind of touched on that you're targeting certain sectors. Is there any more detail you can give us on that? And then the second piece, I guess, the follow-on to that was, I noted the piece about inviting Captain Allen in to hear more about Catwater specifically, so I'd like to put that forward as well.
Perhaps we deal with the second point when we talk about our work program later on, but yeah, certainly the first part. Do you mind, please?
So yeah, the Gateway was created, the Gateway Policy of Sectors was created collaboratively with all of the founding local authorities to basically recognise the strengths of the city and the region in marine defence space. And as we move forward with the policy, broadening that to the wider advanced manufacturing sector, which is notable in the city and area, alongside engineering and of course the priority in net zero. And I think, I mean, I'll give way to James, who's led Ocean's Gate for years, so he's better placed than I to mention occupancy, but very much focused there, particularly around marine and innovation.
Yeah, just to refer back to that pre-let that I mentioned, subsea autonomous gliders. That's the calibre of company that is interested in the space. So, as Ian mentioned, his colleague is marketing the scheme really well and very focused on the right sort of companies that we want to attract. This the location beside the wire rather than behind the wire is very, very attractive, and it's selling itself. It really is. We're very happy.
Can I just do the innovation bit specifically, because I think that was part of your question. So there's a couple of things here. So if you don't build the property and unlock the employment land, when a business is ready to grow, they just go elsewhere. So that's really super important. So we've got to keep building the property, but it's not enough to build the property because you've got to drive the pipeline and the supply as well. So that demand side and the supply side. So what we learned with Ocean's Gate before is if there's a natural cluster there, so you've got defence businesses and marine business, they want to be in Babcock supply chain. But actually, the world's changing. So innovation bringing new products, new processes, new markets. And you know, if you think about the old military ships, which were heavy engineering, hitting big bits of metal, the new technology ships, they're described often as iPhones, that you plug them in and they're sort of, so that the skills of diagnostics, big data, autonomous systems. So what we have to do is we have to overlay an ecosystem on the property, and that's what the innovation space is. So I might even allow Amanda to say about the innovation barns. I think she actually did name them innovation barns. It was a very specific question, so I think we should definitely hear from Amanda on that. But what we're trying to do is create a space that responds to what businesses require. There's an academic interface where the knowledge exchange happens. We provide support to those businesses through all the programs, so access to finance, skills programs, so that's the difference between, you know, just a business in a business park that would be one of our industrial estates in the north of the city, and an ecosystem and an ongoing support mechanism, access to the university and programmes. So the innovation barns themselves will neatly segue. Amanda can tell you the sorts of ideas that I think you've seen one somewhere else.
We were looking at what they did with the Battle Lab as a concept, but what worked with the Battle Lab and what didn't work with the Battle Lab. But what you've got to remember when we talk about innovation, it's not just the building, and it's all the ecosystem that sits around it. So it's what we've already got in the city. We've already got a smart sound. We've already got a university. We've already got a science park that's got amazing 3D printing facilities. We've already got tanks that you can test things in. So the key bit is how you put all these pieces together and create. It's an ecosystem, how it all interconnects and how it all works together. And it's not one thing, it's all the parts of the jigsaw and making sure that that's all joined up. So it's, yes, they're innovation barns, but it gets everybody talking about it, doesn't it? And thinking that it's not just a crinkly shed down by the naval base, it's more than that.
I think that's a revelatory moment, actually. Innovation barns. But it's this whole piece about the nature of warfare changing as well in this space, and the kind of conversations we're having about the future of Denport and what that looks like and the infrastructure that comes around it to support it, and making sure that we can tell this tale about Plymouth as not just a bunch of metal bashers, though metal bashing is quite important still and will continue to be, but this other stuff around agility, about innovation, about cleverness, about technology, which we haven't used those phrases in the context of the yard before, but we need to now. And what we can do is demonstrate that we're already future-proofing it. We want nothing more than for the government to declare Plymouth as the UK Centre for Marine Autonomy, for example. So if we're going to do that, we have to be able to present a case about assets, which we can. We already have more than everybody else has. So what are they waiting for is my challenge to UK government, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the report. Really, really interesting to hear about lots of the projects that are going on. But just wanted to ask a quick question about what companies are being awarded contracts for Freeport projects, particularly with reference to how we're making sure they align with Plymouth City Council's construction charter, given that the Freeport is technically a separate entity to Plymouth City Council.
So our model, again, is pretty unique, really. So if you look at some of the other Freeports, the chief exec of the Freeport is also the chief exec of the port. It's the private sector business and the government intervention are as one. Whereas here we've got a unique partnership between 3 local authorities with a relatively small overhead in the Freeport company, but all of the delivery of the capital project sits with almost entirely in the local authorities. So therefore, everything you've seen and heard about today, so the construction projects within Plymouth's boundaries delivered by the City Council, with our City Council, our social value policies and everything you would hear. The Freeport also signs up to those, but the Freeport particularly leads on innovation, skills and the stimulation of the demand. So, we've actually learned if we build them when they come, but if you can also stimulate the types of businesses you want and get forensic into supply chain of large businesses, then you can get the higher value jobs that we really aspire to. So just to reassure you, absolutely, our model is completely unique. And actually, when we put the bid in, it was kind of one of the rules we had, the political steers, was that we weren't going to apply for a Freeport unless we had those measures in place, whether it was good growth, recognised minimum wage, those sorts of things. So everything you've seen today is procured through the local authority in terms of those big capital projects.
Thank you. Sure.
Thanks, Chair. My question actually picks up on Tudor's, the leader's words a few moments ago. I mean, it's so critical, and I can saw the efforts that were made that the marketing, the selling of ourselves, the really seizing this unique window we have in autonomous marine. This is a sort of finite window for Plymouth to be amongst the global leaders and go-to places for this. So my question, which is going to be a bit of a preamble before it gets to the question, is around how we're doing all we can to drive that inward international investment. You know, your report mentions we've got a brochure and some of the team are attending conferences, but I guess I've sort of flipped Tudor's point back. What more support would the team like to see getting from national government to sell the Freeport and inward investment on the global stage? You said a bit about aligning with the industrial strategy. I guess essentially the question is, if we were to aim as big as we possibly could to make this a success.
That perhaps Kareem might start here, because Kareem's been leading a lot of the strategic growth work, and then if you can start there, we'll come in behind you, Kareem.
What has been doing, the City Council has been doing, is exceptional in the regional context. The work on inclusive growth, they focus on how you structure an economic response. That's not done everywhere. And it's been a consistent theme when I've been outside the city looking in, is the consistent theme that the leader of the council has been basically championing, and all the officers, to deliver an inclusive growth agenda, which requires everybody to focus not just jobs, but also the kind of jobs you create to make sure everybody's benefiting. And that's been a consistent theme all the time from Plymouth. And knowing what it feels like on the outside, it's been quite challenging to understand that real focus. But on the other end of the picture is a transformational growth opportunity, of which there are very few in the region that you can build an economy around and make the step change to a higher paying, higher wage economy that's absolutely looking at the future of the way the economy is changing. And in the particular case that you've identified, you see that's in the case of defense, there has been a complete change in the way defense now is taking place, because technology is a disruptor. And so what Plymouth has been able to do with the Freeport, first of all, is to build an asset that's adding to an existing ecosystem, which is absolutely UK leading when it comes to marine. Marine research is being done here, which is of global status, world class, not just in terms of the university, but in the private sector with Plymouth Marine Laboratory. The whole ecosystem that's here is special. And I think the point that you made around, well, how do you leverage that to deliver what we needed to deliver? That's exactly what the officers are doing now, using the opportunity that's presented by the investment going into Devonport to say, this is our moment now to capitalize on that ecosystem and to take us to another level of investment, which requires now the assets you've done. You've delivered the physical buildings, you've got the research that backs it, the ability to deploy in real time, testing in real conditions, to break things, to learn from it, and then to effectively deploy in the real world. That ecosystem that's there now needs some help. And I think the key message I've heard is the buildings give you the opportunity. We now need to crystallize that demand. And that demand requires now a whole range of things, which effectively need some money and capacity. So that the research is coming, you need to develop the spin-outs. We need to add pace to the number of spin-outs that are coming. And for that to happen, we need specialist funds. And we need a raft of support that government needs to give us to put the scaffolding in place so that we can take the next step. And the opportunity here is very distinctive. It doesn't exist elsewhere at the scale that we have. So I think this is our moment, and we do need some help. And if we get that help, some of the things that you've said that we should be aiming for in terms of the status for that economy piece, that would be a major, I think, messaging issue for us in the region and on a national level. So I think we're doing all that we can. we need some help from government to lean into that proposition.
Yeah, sorry.
So I think, sorry, Judy, do you want to?
No, you go.
So in terms of the very specific marketing, I mean, I think there isn't one answer. So clearly, you know, Plymouth marketing itself isn't enough. We need to do it through others and with others. So we're doing it through all the government departments. You asked about the industrial strategy. You know, our response is in there. We're telling government that we can deliver for government at a UK national level. So through the industrial strategy, through the Freeport marketing, through the cities rebranding exercise, through the Growth Alliance, through businesses talking about us, through Princess Yachts globally, being at international conferences, through the work of Turnchapel, through the work of Devonport, it's absolutely every single space. And what we're trying to do is marshal a single combined message in all of those spaces that just resonates. And that's why you probably heard today we've said the same thing a bunch of times, and we're going to keep saying the things a bunch of times. It's the same message to multiple government ministers. Richard will no doubt say something about that lobbying. So I don't think there is a single thing we've got to do. I don't think it's one conference or one space. In investment, I have a very specific view. I don't think inward investment's a blunderbuss. I think it's a sniper rifle. I've always felt that. I think if you want to go and attract meaningful inward investments, and most inward investments homegrown, as we've talked before, 70% of it is always coming from existing businesses at least. So you've got to know your businesses, you've got to know your supply chain. That's why the aftercare program is super important. So I mean, your experience in this area, so in one sense, I think you probably know the answer to your own question, but we've just got to go for it and speak with a single voice and have confidence, because we've created those jobs. They're going to happen whether we provide the people for them or not, and it's how we now lever off them. So, I mean, the Growth Alliance is probably the short answer.
Yeah, the Growth Alliance is the big piece, I think. I think the word is out about people in the know around the sector. I think everybody knows, I mean, you'll be speaking to somebody at an event and they'll be telling you that they're into some new kind of propulsion and they're here because Princess Yachts are here or because Company Y is here. So so our role continues to be making sure that there's somewhere for them to park their boat when they come here, whether it's in an innovation barn or a tin shed. But what we're completely, I mean, the other thing is, I mean, we've done some work, collaboratively across the South Coast. We've been marketing in the States, around the marine cluster, all the way down the south of England before. So we're doing bits and bobs in that respect. But our main pitch now, if I'm honest, is about dealing with the consequences of the growth that we know is coming. So that means, that's that piece I've said before about Plymouth's Olympic bid, which is we know that the Olympic Stadium is being built in Devonport, £4.4 billion worth of investment, and that's making sure that we can persuade house builders who are currently not here, because we've only got 4 or 5 of them, of the nationals here. We need more of them to come and seek us out as they begin to understand a bit more about what the opportunity is. 10,000 homes in the city centre over the next 10 years. Come on down. We've got that conversation going on. We need to make sure that everybody in government knows the Plymouth story now and also the urgency of it. And we've explained this before, but the future nuclear at-sea deterrent has to be in Plymouth, can be only be in Plymouth, but we need to make sure that the government understands its role in making sure that the economy of Plymouth is not harmed by this, but is actually seen as another takeoff point for us economically. So that's the conversation. That's where most of the marketing that we're doing is at the moment, is badgering every department of government to understand that this is their project. It's not just a defence project. It's an economic project, it's a housing project, it's a transport project, it's a cultural project. And making sure that we've made that plain. We're making some good progress. We got a team of civil servants coming down and think Monday to have a good look at this and take some messages back. We've had ministerial. The Secretary of State for Defence is now seen. Once it's called for information to go direct to him. So that's obviously an elevation in terms of status of the project that's very welcome. But that's the marketing. And so the effort, the what we want from government ask, there are a few stages to this. Making sure that it is absolutely not dependent on any devolution conversations, that actually this must exist outside of that because of where we are and where others are on devolution. We cannot wait for devolution. It must happen now. So that's a really important conversation. And I think that's heard and understood as well. By the way, that's another piece of work we've been working really, really hard on. And then I think it's this whole thing around seeing the well-being of Plymouth as a national endeavour, if I could put it like that. The CASD project is a national undertaking, a national endeavour, but the making sure that Plymouth is fit for purpose, and that all the businesses that we already got here can thrive in that environment is a fundamental piece of work. And, you know, if you think about where we stand with regard to the flow opportunity, if the government are backing us to be a part of that conversation, then they obviously need to be aware that there's another bit of government that's spending a lot of money and taking a lot of people potentially out of the frame for working in flow. So they've got to work on that together, right? So this whole thing all the time, all we're doing all the time is joining everything up, squaring circles, putting square pegs in round holes sometimes, to make sure that everybody's aware exactly. We know what we're doing, and we know what we need, and we're making it plain. The difference at the moment is what we can have as opposed to what we need, and making sure that they're aligned. And that's the major bit of political lobbying that we'll need to do cross-party.
I'm very grateful. It's been really very interesting update, a great report on where we are from where we have been. And James, you mentioned it earlier. You used the phrase I haven't heard in ages since Ocean Gates 1, behind the wire. Yeah. And you remember we had many discussions about a fence, if I recall, and moving. Yeah, indeed. But there we go. Anyhow, before I get in trouble and say any more, the report is for noting. It's very much noted. Thank you so much, really. Again, another insightful update. Thank you very much for your time. And well done to everybody involved. Very exciting. Okay, members, we're moving on to agenda item number 7, as if, you know, just to confirm there's still not an awful lot going on in Plymouth. On to the next most exciting innovation, which is the National Marine Park. So, Leader, would you mind introducing this for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. We got more players in Manchester City, haven't we, today? So it's quite something, actually. This time last year, we were about to hear the news that we had successfully secured £11.6 million of National Heritage Lottery funding. And that was going to enable us to deliver a £22 million Horizons project to start to bring to life the UK's first national marine park here in Plymouth. Now, we are here to update you on progress as we've nearly finished our first eventful year of 5. And I think it's fair to say that we've made quite a good start, I have to say. Firstly, it's important that I remind you of what it's all about. So, it's got lots of elements. It's got nature in it. It's got capital. It's got digital. But ultimately, the project's about people. Enabling everybody in the city to connect with the amazing nature in the park. Already we have enabled over 1,500 people to get in, on, under or next to our park, supported by our National Marine Park gateways at Mountbatten, Tyneside and Mount Edgecombe. The gateways have been working hard to enable people to enjoy the park in new ways, from learning to swim to getting out on the water to archaeology camps. Right? Over 6,000 people have connected with our Meet the Marine Park programme. Our roving megaphone for the project, led by our partners in the Ocean Conservation Trust, who run the aquarium, of course. Now, they've been going out across the city, engaging people with all the amazing things about the park. 970 school children have started their National Marine Park journey as part of our schools programme. 663 volunteers have been working alongside our teams to enhance the National Marine Park, delivering over 7,160 hours of volunteering, which is pretty amazing. It's amazing that we managed to count 7,160, but there you are. Now, to ensure that we can enable even more people to enjoy and value the park, we've also kick-started a really significant £10 million programme of waterfront regeneration this year. Now, this includes Tyneside, one of our most iconic buildings. I don't know whether you've ever seen it. It's a big pool at the front, on the waterfront there. I don't know if you've seen it. Now, we've already made significant progress on restoring and repurposing the site to highlight its amazing heritage. And we're allowed to use the word heritage, aren't we? And enabling more people to visit and enjoy one of the best views of the park that we've got. Mountbatten. Now, this is our old transformation of the peninsula. It's not just about the building, although important that is. We're going to have a more accessible pontoon. We had a very exciting meeting last week talking about the shape of that pontoon, how big it was and how much it would cost. And there's more to pontoon construction than you might think, you know. And if we ever have an hour to spare, I'll take you through it all. Well, I won't. I'll bring some experts in. But one of the other things on the peninsula is the Mountbatten Tower. Now, one of these, you know, I keep going on about Plymouth, hide its light under a bushel and then hides the bushel. We've got a Norman Tower in Plymouth, right? Now, forgive me, I'm Welsh, right? If this was in Wales, there'd already be multicoloured lights and loudspeakers off it, right? But we just keep it over there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make something of it. All right, so it's going to be it'll be a destination in its own right. It'll be one of our best heritage features. And you know, at the moment, you know, very few people have had the opportunity to be in it and around it and experience it. But we're going to make sure that's changed. And then the Mountbatten Centre itself, which we're probably going to rename. Well, we are going to rename. What we're going to rename it as yet, I don't know. But we're going to refurbish and recast that to make more of the opportunity, actually, considering where it faces and what it could be. We're going to transform it. We'll look forward to showing you all of that. And then there's Mount Edgecombe. Last but not least, Mount Edgecombe, the garden battery. Now, many of us have stood on top of it. Very few of us have been in it, but that's going to change when we've done this project because we'll be opening it up. It's beautiful in there. The vaulted ceiling in there is just something to behold. And, you know, who knew it was there? Well, you know, you will know. We do already have people, well, not people, but we do have residents in the garden battery at the moment, which is bats. If it's not slow worms or crickets, it's bats. But so we've got to wait for the bats before we can get going on that. I mean, I think it's only right. You know, there's a time to disturb bats and there's a time not to disturb bats, and this is the time not to disturb bats. But we're going to start work on that in the summer when the bats have left the belfry. And capital is not the only thing that's going to be progressed, by the way. I think it's somewhat important to say. We've started a new partnership with Plymouth Culture. So Hannah's going to hopefully share a bit of that with you, because that's going to help us deliver on the digital part. We've submitted a bid to the Arts Council to get some money, more money out of them. They love us. 780,000, is that right? Right, there we are, 751, right, here we are. They knocked us back a bit, but that's all right. Anyway, you're going to tell us a bit more about that. So it has been brilliant. We have actually set quite a high bar, you know, I think in terms of what's been achieved. So, you know, next year we'll have to go some to beat it. But I think it's been really important to thank everybody, the team, the National Marine Park team, our partners, the contractors, and the volunteers and the community members who've supported the project this year. As I say, it's people that make this. So, you know, let's see what we can achieve together in 25. So I'm going to invite Councillor Tom Brysdell now to reveal something else to you. Tom and I sit on many committees going through all this exciting stuff, so it's great to have him here to share with you. Tom.
Thank you, Tudor. As he's just said, it's been a real pleasure sitting alongside him on these boards and also working with this exceptional team and partners on what is a hugely exciting project. Tudor's mentioned a lot about the ambition of the National Marine Park and some of the really exciting infrastructure projects. And you might think that's surely all there is to cover, but there's a few more things I wanted to mention with regards to the activity plan, and particularly the Nature Boost programme, which I've been involved with. So first of all, the schools programme, Seeing the Schools programme. This is something that Councillor Sally Creswell's been working closely with the team on. Tudor mentioned that nearly 1,000 Key Stage 2 students have already been involved. But I'm really pleased to confirm that by the end of the programme, all primary schools in Plymouth will be invited to participate. It's a huge undertaking, great opportunity for behaviour change. They'll all have a trip to the National Marine Aquarium. Yeah, it's so amazing. We've got this facility right there on our doorstep. Visits from inspirational guests to their schools, but also some really exciting digital opportunities as well to experience the marine side of things. The volunteering programme is absolutely huge. So about 600 people have already contributed their activities on this. That includes things like beach cleans, but also getting them to help out as well with some council activities as well, like helping to prepare Tinside for the season, and making sure all people feel a part to do something practical with regards to the sea. The Ranger programme, so many of you I'm sure will have seen the Rangers out and about. They're such a visible face of the National Marine Park. It's an amazing team which has been spotlighted on the Facebook page recently. You'll hear the term gateways coming up. Julia's mentioned some. So big capital works happening on those, but also in terms of the opportunities for people as well. So swim safe, trying sessions for snorkeling and diving, youth nights. The number of young people who have been involved with this is vast. trying things that might be new to them, sailing, opportunities just to start paddling in the water and learning how to do that safely is a real great opportunity with this location. And the marine park aspect, a lot of Plymouth is right there on the coast, whether that's on the seafront itself or in terms of our estuaries as well. But there are landlocked communities where we're going out and getting the teams to those as well. I spoke to Councillor Lowry this morning where he was saying, quite how surprised he was how many people in Southway have been involved in some of these activities, and seeing that this is getting out to communities right in the top of the city is really exciting as well. Every single aspect of this is being evaluated to ensure that each year we can improve our delivery and impact. The team's been really clear that this isn't something that we want to just evaluate after a 5-year project and think, I wish we'd done it this way. There's a constant rolling programme looking at how we can be even better. I mentioned the Nature Boost programme earlier, and I wanted to mention some of the things we've been doing on that. Nature is integrated through all aspects of the programme, but there are some specific elements that commence this year, which will hopefully add to what's been covered this time last year. Tudor and I had the opportunity to visit the MBA on the Hoe recently. They've been hosting our Little Rays of Hope programme, where rays have been hatched. If you don't follow the National Marine Park Facebook page, I'd recommend you do. There's currently a thing at the moment called the 12 Rays of Christmas, where people have been suggesting names for these young rays. But it's great to see a whole range of the public getting involved in that. Raymond has been suggested, unsurprisingly. Dave the Ray, not quite sure why, but great. Rayla Swift, Lana Del Rey, so feel free. And Shay, welcome to make it a recommendation of the committee if people think of any additional ones that we might want to add to that. But there's been other things as well of a serious nature linked to that too. You'll know that the environmental planning team's been working with the National Marine Park on green and blue finance opportunities, and we're very much doing that at the heart of this project too. So seagrass tokens is something being explored. Really exciting spin on some of the aspects we're doing around that, a kind of pioneering investment approach to securing resources to make sure we're doing everything we can to enhance nature. And there's various other nature projects that we're working on with some real iconic species like seahorses that I think will prove to be really popular, but also looking at viability of habitat restoration projects as well. Without further ado, I'll pass on to Kat, who's going to give some more details on specific projects.
Thank you. First slide, please, Hannah. So when we came to you last time, we were just about to put the bid in. So good news, not only that we got the lottery money, but if you remember when we put the bid in, we also had a £2 million underwrite from the council for fundraising, which I'm very pleased to say we've now already got. So we got youth investment funding very shortly after lottery funding, which means we've now met that fundraising target. And as always, we're looking for more, but just to update on that one. Next slide, please. So just to give a bit more flavour of the engagement so far. So all the activities that the leader and Councillor Barsdale has talked to is about engaging people in a different way with the sound. So we are very much looking to work with people who've never had the opportunity to engage with the water in ways that they want to. So this is a programme that's definitely led by the community, and we have definitely been taking the park to the people this year with the idea that on our marine citizenship journey, which is what we've set out we want to achieve, so we don't want just new users, we want people to love the sound, be part of it and help look after it, that this year has all been about inspiring and engaging people. And that really means having a lot of fun and giving people the opportunity to try something they've never tried. And I think that has been hugely successful. Next slide, please. In loads of ways. So you're not going to enjoy the water if you can't swim, and we've managed to get loads of people through our Swim Safe programme, and which means it not only gives them the confidence to swim in the pool, they can then go through the gate and into the cove. As you can see from these slides, it really is about getting out to see the people, and I think our ranger team have done that hugely successfully this year, both at scale with the Seafest that we joined in with this year, working with PWP to really focus tea and toast in communities where we're looking to do additional changes. Next slide, please. So really, the reason we are investing in these amazing assets is to do a number of things, to make people proud of where they live and connect them to the heritage of the city, but also these gateways really do provide access into the marine park for more people. Next slide, please. So the plans that we've got are really to take what is within Tinside and really bring it back to life. So this is an image of the first floor. And the key thing with what we're doing at Tinside is not only will it be more accessible, more welcoming, but we're also vesting assets in these spaces that will make money, which will provide the legacy for the project. So from the very beginning, we're working with Plymouth Active Leisure to make sure the business plan that goes with all this capital investment will drive an income that at the end of the lottery project, we can sustain that activity so we don't get that cliff edge. And it means the National Marine Park will go on for decades with the activities that we're looking to run. Next slide, please. And we're also, one of the key feedback that we had in the development phase was we love the sea, but we don't want to get wet. So we have been making sure that we put lots of parts of the asset in where you can enjoy the view without having to go crazy on a paddleboard or swim across the pool. Next slide, please. The same counts at Mountbatten. So as the leader said, this is a whole peninsula transformation. It is about making sure people can get near the water. Next slide, please. And again, we vest assets in these places so that they're building the legacy for when the lottery money finishes. Next slide, please. And really making the most of the heritage we've got. Honestly, the views from the top of this tower are utterly amazing, and there's probably a handful of people that get the opportunity currently, which is what we're looking to change. Next slide, please. And the same at Mount Edgecombe. So again, so few people have been in this space, and it is utterly amazing when you go inside and look through the casemates and out to sea. So it will be like visiting an amazing castle. We're not going to make it look like it's something new, but it will be, next slide please, something that will be far more accessible to people. So Tinside, you'll see the scaffolding's up. We are looking to finish that ready for the new swim season. Mountbatten is going to start shortly, and Mount Edgecombe when our BAT residents have left for the summer. Next slide please. So this is just to highlight our volunteers have been extraordinary this year, from, like I say, cleaning out Tinside Pool to helping with beach cleans. And we've done corporate events as well, which have been really welcomed across the board. Thank you. And I couldn't resist putting the schools programme. So this is the first school who on their way to the National Marine Aquarium, and the first start of our Rangers of the Future. And it is really special seeing how excited these kids are to get involved. And the idea of running a 4-year programme with a number of schools as well as yearly programmes will really give us that insight of what it takes to ensure people have a lifelong love of the ocean, but also have that inspiration to go into all those blue jobs that we're looking for in the future. Next slide, please. And here's a baby Raymond. So these are the rays that we have been working with MBA to grow. And I think the key thing about our nature programme, nature feeds through everything we do. That's why the marine citizenship programme's in there. But we're also doing some really pathfinding work around how do we get people to see what they wouldn't usually see? How do they get inspired by that? And how do they change? So this is one aspect of the project, and the other pathfinding part is around the investment in nature-based solutions, which is interestingly linking back to the last agenda item, doing a lot of work with the Crown Estate. So they're really interested in what we're doing around the nature as well as what we're doing investing in the city. So, you know, win-win all round on that front. So next slide, please. So 2025, as we said, we've been quite busy, but we still have more to come. I think next year, the big focus will be on the digital park and our relationship that we've built with Plymouth Culture. So we will have 4 interventions over the next 4 years. First one starting next year, watch this space. We will have the Inspire programme, which is our programme for 16 to 24-year-olds about those career pathways, again, leading into previous agenda items about how do we inspire people to go on those routes into those jobs. And we will be finishing the gateways and continuing our engagement programme. So plenty more to come next year.
Wow, that's great. Has anyone suggested Tudor Ray? Has that been on the list? No? We'll put that over. All right. Kevin.
Thank you. I'm going to struggle not to praise you because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of that coming your way. My only criticism would be I've not seen Councillor Tom Bryce delve in enough cold water. But my question is, I think the initiatives with the schools are fantastic. I know the box was doing something similar. We're trying to get as many schools in place. I like the fact you've sent invites to all these schools. Now, one of the things the box had was the uptake with some of the areas of deprivation that had a struggle with affordability to actually get to some of these places. Has there been any kind of work undertook to look at potentially some of the funding or some ways to try and help these schools utilise these fantastic projects?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's great because we can learn from the box and all those programs that have come before. So we were well prepared. So the way we've done it is to have a very alongside type program with the schools. So we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the program, not just inviting people with paper, but we had sessions where the head teachers or other teachers could come on webinars and find out about it. Those that didn't respond, we phoned, we went in to see them, we worked out what the barriers are. Now, there'll always be schools that can't get involved with that year, but we'll always keep them and invite them again in future years when things might change. But yes, transport is covered, so we cover that. The other thing we do is we want to make sure we're really supporting the teachers so that it becomes the BAU, not just a special trip to the NMA. So last week we ran an event for all the teachers that are within the cohort this year to come along to help shape the programme, to find out what the barriers are, and making sure even things like all of their children could come and they got shown around the aquarium while they did their training and engagement. So we are trying to pick up where all those barriers are and overcome them, and we will do that every year until we get it as perfect as possible.
Thank you. Councillor McKay?
Thank you, Chair. As a fan of puns, Taylor Swift and nature, I'm genuinely really gutted I didn't come up with Scare Swift. So my point is kind of around what I think is really brilliant is how engaged in the community this has been, how embedded the approach has been. I wanted to pick up on a little bit of the marketing communications aspects, and I did note in the report that you've had some really great interaction on social and on website development. But I wonder, looking ahead to 2025, I worry that we aren't always finding people where they are, particularly in relation to email marketing. It's a really great place to get into people's inboxes and remind them of all the beautiful and wonderful stuff and events that are coming up. Also in terms of like out of home, any paid advertisement, essentially what is the plan to make sure that more people know about the amazing stuff that's happening?
I agree. It's really hard, isn't it? And you can always do more. And I mean, I'm going to invite actually Hannah to come in, if that's right, Hannah, because I think the digital program in particular is a very unique way of getting to people, and it's sort of really exciting. So, but I mean, I think we just got to keep plugging away at this because it isn't easy. I just want to talk about the Rangers, if I can, just for a minute, because I mean, how many we got now? Seven Rangers. And I got them all for a cup of tea the other day, and you ask these people, tell us about your backgrounds. Between them, they've got something like 25 degrees. They've all got marine management, conservation. I mean, these are an extraordinary group of people who've vocationally chosen to come here. So I absolutely, the marketing, I think there's loads more we can do, and I think digital part. But I just want to talk about that grassroots engagement that builds the authenticity, because if we haven't got that, when the marketing lands, people they're not interested, and the amount of reach that group of people are getting, and I think a lot of our resonance and our community and our credibility comes from that group of 7 people. So if any of you get a chance to engage them or meet them, do ask them about their background, because I think they are our best asset by a factory mile, and I'm super proud of them. But do you want to just talk about the digital opportunity, Hannah? Because I think that is a game changer for next year about how we can do scale engagement.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. So I think the marketing is always a challenge on these things because we're busy delivering, and telling people is a really key part of that. I think what we've discussed in terms of the digital more broadly, although we're not responsible for the whole marketing programme, is how do we move from broadcast to engagement. So effectively, just constantly broadcasting is not a method to grow or diversify your engagement. So just shifting that concept of let's talk about how people are actually engaging and responding to those conversations. So that will see elements of community and user generated content a big part of the conversation next year, which I think is really important. Sort of handing over some platforms, handing over some conversations is a really good way of understanding where they want to start the conversation, and our rangers will be absolutely critical to identifying some of those and where we start that. I think the wider digital programme, what we've basically sort of aligned is the fact that it is an engagement programme. So it has digital at its core, but it is about enhancing engagement. So that for us looks at how we use different technologies, how we use different platforms, how we use different types of interventions. And effectively, you know, so lots of people have said, I love the sea, but I don't want to get wet. Well, there's also plenty of people who don't know they yet love the sea, or what role it plays in their life. And so the cultural dimension for us with the digital is that we could start from a different place with people. We could start with, you know, music and listening and watching and doing, and bring them into that conversation about the ocean and the sea. So I think those two things, engagement rather than broadcast, and starting with a kind of cultural intervention and moving it into the nature space, is going to be what we'll test specifically next year.
Thank you. Councillor Rainsford.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of issues and one very small nitpicky point. But first I must say and repeat what the Chair said, which is wow. You know, this is absolutely buzzing and you're doing fantastic work, so thank you. The nitpicky point is this is a marine park. A lot of the documentation just refers to it as the park. Now, the park in Plymouth is a crematorium. And, you know, this is marine, so can we please change that in future? Second point is the education programme is fantastic, and you're clearly doing everything you can to get to as many children as possible. There are an awful lot of children in the city who are elected to be educated at home. How are we getting to their carers and parents in order to enable those children to perhaps have sight of this? And the final point is about carbon offsetting. Are we thinking about being part of a carbon offset programme? Are we already part of a carbon offset programme that I don't know about? Is it something we would want to do, or is it something that generally people are moving away from?
Sure, happy to give a stab at both of those. So we did speak at board around how we could make sure that people who were home educated were engaging with this. On reflection, we decided to, through the Sea in the Schools programme, prioritise certain types of schools for the first cohort. So that was chosen on the basis of certain criteria. But all of the activities that take part at the gateway locations are also open to children from any educational context. And so we can certainly help to send those in the right direction. Specifically on carbon, because of the significant amount of external funding that comes for this programme through the lottery, there are various expectations when it comes to carbon accounting as part of this. So we're working with a specific contractor who is looking at every aspect of carbon when it comes to this. And there are certain challenges around that. You know, we're talking about encouraging thousands of people to go and engage with marine environment, and so travel immediately comes to mind as part of that. I've been so impressed by some of the work that different events have tried to channel that in a more positive direction. So with Seafest, for instance, quite recently, there were various aspects of that: Shark and Ride bus shuttle, encouraging people to come by bus. There was an opportunity for free barrel bikes towards the Plymouth Hoe, so if you got off at those locations, the journey would be free. There's stuff they're doing around waste minimisation, those aspects as well. And every single report that comes to the National Marine Park Board has an environmental impact and mitigation aspect to it. So even though it might not be a massive key decision like we have with our climate impact assessment, every single one of those, that is very much at the heart of that process. You also mentioned offsetting as well. In terms of our mindset and approach, we'll always look at minimising emissions before we look at offsetting. But seagrass and the blue carbon aspect is something that could go into that aspect of offsetting in the future. We know that seagrass, in terms of the sequestration of carbon, is 20 times more effective than some types of tree species, for instance. But it's also a very difficult form of nature to work with. There are problems of getting it to attach to the seabed, and there's a lot of research involved that we've been working with, and also the work with the National Marine Aquarium on this, which is nationally significant as well. Thanks.
Councillor Smith. That's outrageous. We'll put you on the spot. Come up with another one quickly. Wow. Well, we'll note that in the minutes. Councillor Ricketts.
Thank you, Chair. Brilliant, fantastic report. Absolutely outstanding what we're doing on this. Something that Kat was talking about in her presentation, the tin side refurb is amazing. Were there any particular challenges there? Because I can imagine you could uncover all sorts of sensitive, sort of historical gems of Plymouth. If you could just take us through that by your smile, it sounds like there's been some events.
Well, when we were doing the clean-up, we definitely found lots of artefacts. I'm not sure they were historic in nature, but to be honest, it's not been as bad as we were expecting. I mean, it's a historic building by the sea, so you always think there's going to be some issues. But actually, we knew we needed to do some waterproofing. So you've got a building against rocks. It's all but the contractors have been great. They came up with a really pragmatic solution. Once we'd got all of the newer materials out and opened up the space, it was phenomenal, actually, the original building, in terms of a lot of the issues I think had come from the additions that had just come over decades in terms of adding to it. It's obviously a listed building, so we are super sensitive with everything we're doing. So we've had lots of listed building consents to make sure that as we go along and we find that we need to make a change, that's been gone through. I mean, we could do with a few less Berts and Daras, if I'm honest, just because, add the wind into working next to the sea is not helpful. But I have to say the contractors have been really great in going, well, we're working in the winter on the side of the marine park. We need to be really sensible. So I think ultimately, because we'd planned ahead and because we'd had a good look at the building, we found most of the things early and they could plan for it and do that. And anything that's come along, we've had a really good team to look at it. So from where we thought we might be to where we are now, I think we've kept to time pretty much, which on a building like this is pretty phenomenal. And I know Tudor and I went round a couple of weeks ago, and actually the progress they've made, it's starting to really come together already. So I think it's been kind to us, bearing in mind historic buildings by the sea can be very complicated.
That's great to hear, because there's weather elements to this as well, which I can imagine with the people working on it could be quite challenging. Be great to get a site visit potentially at some point when we're ready. That'd be great as a panel. That'd be really exciting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Really, really pleased, especially to see Ernest Settle and Firestone Bay mentioned specifically. I've always said that the National Marine Park should absolutely extend beyond the Hoe and the Barbican, and it needs to include those communities who are also waterfront communities. Is there also scope for including Devonport and St Budo? I'm also thinking you've got the wonderful facility of Mount Wise pools for sort of more, water sports activities, learning to swim, that kind of thing. Just wondered if any thought had been given to that.
So there are certain gateway locations and certain community access points where a significant amount of attention is prioritised, but there are various locations to lots of the aspects of the National Marine Park events and activities, and that goes beyond some of those locations as well. Kat, is there anything you wanted to add on locations?
So they were the first two community access points we identified in the development phase. really because there'd been a kind of community upswelling of interest for quite some time. So it was a great place to look to start with. But in the bid, there's also to do 3 new ones. So there'll be that same focus across 3 other areas. And what we said is we wouldn't rush identifying those. We'd use the first 1 to 2 years to identify where they needed to be in terms of where they could be both beneficial and impactful, but also where the community were in those spaces in terms of their interactions. So in addition to the Cecil and Firestone, there'll be 3 more community access points by the end of the project.
I think any suggestions would be very welcome in that space. I mean, there are, if you think as well, the council, we're investing heavily in the refurbishment of Firestone Bay Pool, making sure that facilities there for swimming, both in the pool and outside of the pool are there, and that's another opportunity for interaction that can be explored. But seriously, anybody got any hidden gateways into the water that we haven't thought of? We certainly would be wanting to discuss those.
That's great. Well, to quote the great bard Shakespeare, wow. That's the 3rd fantastic presentation we've had today, and it, it's a great story and something that we are very proud of, and another great message out of Plymouth. It's recommended the committee note the update, and it is just an update, and support the ongoing delivery. Well, I'm sure everybody can nod towards that. Thank you so much. Really great work underway, and we look forward to the next update.
One thing, just reflecting on the question about projects. So one of the things that is not always told, because it can't be told, is capital projects don't just happen. That they have program boards and they have details and governance and problems. What the reason we're able to do this stuff, we've been doing it for 10 years. So when James was in earlier on the capital project, we recruited James specifically to do Oceansgate, and then moved on from Oceansgate, and then we brought him into National Marine Park. So if you look at what a lot of what you're seeing in the capital space, you could have the same conversation revenue, but what you're seeing now is the cumulative ability of always building that pipeline 5 years ahead, so that you don't lose talented staff and quality staff who are able to do the really difficult things. And we've as you know, we've sort of had confirmation of our levelling up fund, 19.5 million. And the reason we got our 19.5 million was because so many councils around the country couldn't deploy their capital, couldn't spend their money. So there was an underspend. And then at that point, the government goes, who is a safe bet? Who can deliver on time and well? And it's not because we have, heroic members of staff. It's because we maintain a long-term pipeline with certainty. They build their skills and they retain. And it just made me think that, a lot of the work, the fact that James is, clearly got some amazing experts, but James is agnostic. He can do any capital project, but we can move that talent on because we keep that pipeline going. And it's such a profound way, and it's why we've been so successful over the last 15 years, is that, a lot of cities you'd have in this conversation, the people sitting here, we all be consultants. It would be DTZ, it would be the Ward Williams would be a project management team. And if you look at here, it's all in-house. And I think that's totally, well, certainly in my experience, I can't think of another place that does that. So generally what would happen is you'd be speaking to, Tudor would go, this is brilliant, I'd like to introduce to Ward Williams, our project managers. But they're brilliant. I mean, we use them all the time. But if you don't have the buy-in and the belief and the passion for those projects, you can't be the clients. And then if you don't have the expertise, you can't go the extra mile. So I was listening to that answer, it just made me think that, Chittinside is a complete nightmare to work on. It's by the sea, it's listed, but it's the quality of the people that we've managed to retain, that 15-year approach. And it's you as elected members who've done that, because you could have turned it off at any time and you haven't. And it just made me think about that.
In times we've kept it going, Chair, and I think that's important. I mean, that we talked about the innovation barns and the direct developments. We've done 11 or 12 of those now. There's not another local authority that I know of that's been active in that space and done that much. All right, we're doing it because the private sector aren't interested. I still, for the life of me, can't see why, because as soon as, we're renting them out before we've built them. But nevertheless, we're doing it, and the beneficiary of that, of course, is that money that we generate from that. Once it's paid off the loan, actually benefits local taxpayers as well and creates jobs. So, I mean, why wouldn't you do it? So, I mean, I got to say, yesterday I was having a rare look at the comments on the Plymouth Live website, because as soon as I looked at it, I realised why I don't. But there was one that says the council doesn't finish anything. I just invite that person who spent 2 minutes on the lavatory typing that, actually to tune in to what they've heard today and to reflect on the hard work of the council staff and the Marine Park staff and everybody who's been behind what's been going on here. Because you can never say that the council doesn't finish anything. We are doing more than most, much more than most. And I would say happy Christmas to that correspondent and a prosperous New Year.
Well, I think it's probably that individual doesn't live in this local authority area, but there we are. They may be talking about someone else, Julia. Once again, thank you so much for attending. I'm very grateful. We'll allow just a half a minute or so for the reshuffle, and we'll get on to the next item. Thank you.
It's an issue.
Thank you. Okay, we are now at agenda item 8, which is the cultural plan update. Welcome, Councillor Lang and Victoria. Nice to see you again. So I think, Jemima, you're going to introduce this, is that right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us here today. I hope you agree that the culture plan is a really ambitious plan for the city, forward-looking with people and place absolutely at its core. But the ambition is not a fairy tale without substance. It is rooted in the cultural best practice that we already have in the city, thanks to incredible cultural organisations and the creative practitioners who live and work here. One of the key points made in the plan is the desire and the need to ensure that culture is embedded in all areas of life for our residents, so that culture is intrinsically linked to our city vision. The economic benefits of the creative and cultural sector are well understood, but I really believe that the social impact is of equal, if not greater, significance. Culture supports the wider placemaking agenda, achieving social impact as well as economic output. A strong and authentic cultural offer makes a place more attractive, helping to attract and retain students and graduates and the wider workforce. And I know that you have heard, talked earlier about the people that we need to attract to the city. We need to have a thriving cultural sector and offer, because that's what people are looking for when they're thinking about moving and taking that big step in their lives. And access to this offer for all can help to support improved mental and physical health outcomes
for individuals, it supports community cohesion, and we know it also supports educational attainment. All of these things we are striving for as a city and actively pursuing with partners, with funders, with investors, and with government departments. And now more than ever, we need to continue to value culture as a city and better articulate its significant and unique contribution to economic and social outcomes. I was at a conference in Bradford a couple of weeks ago talking about how we value culture in the city, and everybody was kind of blown away about what I talked about what we do and what our plans are, because many local authorities are not prioritising culture in the way that we continue to do. We're delighted to see the role of culture and creative industry so clearly valued within the Labour government's missions and industrial strategy, and we've had an opportunity to align local ambition and policy with what's being talked about at a national level. Continued and further investment in culture is needed, and this must come through a holistic approach. We have so much to celebrate in Plymouth, with some really significant achievements across the year, in spite of the challenges which we are all very familiar with. Thank you, Chair.
Any further, Hannah, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I'm just going to go through a short presentation if that's okay, so which I can see is there. So I'm Hannah, I'm Chief Executive of Plymouth Culture. We're a sector development agency that is a strategic partner to the local authority. So we authored the 10-year culture plan back in 2021 when it was adopted at the bequest of the local authority, which was adopted through Cabinet then. And so I'm not going to kind of go through every inch of the report, although very happy to take questions around all of it. But what I thought it would be useful to talk about was a little bit more around the impact of what is happening, to give you a sense of kind of what these projects are achieving beyond the numbers. So by way of a little sort of context setting, the culture plan that hopefully you know intimately and will remember has three key drivers to it, and they kind of frame the whole conversation about why and what we do. And those are centred around community, environment and inclusive growth. So we really took the opportunity in the midst of COVID actually to look at how a culture strategy might do more than deliver art and actually support citywide agendas, community and economic agendas as well. So we've really had the opportunity to root our 10-year culture plan in a much wider city ambition. Thank you. Next slide, please. So alongside that, we agreed 5 ambitions. I won't read them all, but they're useful context in some of the projects that we've listed and why we're doing those. So, of course, we wanted to make use of our blue, grey, green spaces. We cannot have a cultural offer in Plymouth that doesn't use and speak to our nature-based assets and also our built environment. So we wanted to make that really critical to kind of Plymouth's cultural offer. We wanted to place more cultural encounters in the everyday. So why shouldn't you walk to school and see something artistic, or go to the barbers and see something cultural? You know, to make that much more part of people's everyday was a really important element to us. We wanted to develop an exemplary model of co-creation, and this has come out of the fact that we have some exemplary organisations in the city that are nationally known for working in a co-creation way with communities. And so that's beyond consultation, beyond participation, and actually enabling communities to shape the cultural offer for themselves. We wanted that to become a real hallmark of the cultural offer within Plymouth. We wanted to focus on immersive activity. We have some physical assets within the city that are very unique, both not just nationally but across Europe. And how do we create experiences that give a kind of different opportunity for people to actually be immersed in that cultural setting? It links to the digital conversation we've had with the National Marine Park, so it's given us a footing into that conversation. And then we wanted to really think about how we embed equity and equality. So how do we create a cultural offer that gives platform to voices, particularly young people in our city, so that they have a say in shaping that and not just consuming culture. Thank you. And we felt the approach around that was 3 core areas. So places and spaces that we were working within, the sector itself. None of this happens unless we have creative people who want to live and work here and who are able to do so because there is a sustainable career for them. And then our communities. So how do we really place people at the centre of this work? So I wanted to give that as a bit of context for why we've then done the strategic projects that we have, and for hopefully them to make some sense within the wider ambition. Thank you. So the Place Partnership See for Yourself programme is really an opportunity, a moment in time to have a transformational opportunity linked to the National Marine Park. We had extensive conversations, Dave and Victoria and Jemima have been involved in those with Arts Council to talk about how we bring culture alongside this nature-based initiative, because it is fundamentally an engagement programme. It is about cultural identity, both people discovering, rediscovering and reimagining that, and that this was a moment in a very unique context to have culture embedded within that programme. Pleased to say they agreed and they liked that concept. So we're really looking at how that programme can transform opportunities for the sector and audiences as well as communities. So there's a huge alignment with obviously the ambitions that you've heard earlier, the National Marine Park more widely, and a really unique opportunity to put ourselves on the map nationally, I would say, for having expertise in that area of work. Thank you. Our ambitions within that, I've listed some of the details of what we're looking to achieve. This was what was submitted within the Arts Council bid, to work with hundreds of creative practitioners, which is fantastic, creating paid opportunities there. Many of them freelancers, so creating an ecosystem that we want to sustain here. But importantly, I don't know why it says liver audiences, sorry. Live audiences. So in-person experiences, immersive experiences, but also that digital reach, which is so important for those that either can't physically get somewhere or want to engage in a different way and to have some legacy to it. So not insignificant in terms of the reach we're seeking there. Thank you. Next slide, please. Yeah. So now coming on to the Creative Leadership Programme, I've given some details in the report, but it was really important for me to share with you the impact around that programme. This was a pilot that we secured funding from Arts Council Regional to deliver. How we start to look at creative leaders in a less hierarchical way. So there are leaders within our community who don't have a CEO at the front of their title and don't sit at the top of an organisation or a large initiative, but actually are fundamentally making positive change within their organisations, within their communities. And they are leaders, they are showing leadership. So how do we sort of democratise that conversation? One of the things we found in our research was many people who are doing fantastic things do not self-identify as a leader. They just don't. And so there was this kind of imposter syndrome of people doing brilliant things, but not really owning that or being aware of that, not understanding how they develop into that space and own that space. And that's potentially a huge missed opportunity for all of us, with people who could sit on our boards, who could be our project partners, or who could be voices around the table. So that it was very much based on that uncovering and giving people opportunity where they wouldn't perhaps put themselves forward. Thank you. And what we found through that programme was a real shift, thankfully. We hoped it would, but it absolutely did, within people's own perceptions of themselves, their skills, so people rating their skills from what they hope a leader should have and what they saw themselves as having as to what they had at the end of the programme increasing. But also the point I've put there in the second bullet point is around their feeling of connectedness, and that they felt through this programme they were actually connected to like-minded people and opportunities in a way that they hadn't before. The comments might be a little small there, but really people saying that that this is placing Plymouth on the map. Seeing Plymouth as a place where you can develop your personal and professional leadership is incredible, and people feeling like this is something really exciting that's starting here. So we're actively working with partners now, including Arts Council, to look at how we embed this as business as usual, and how we should speak and work with people within our city. Thank you. Next slide. And then I thought we'd have a few pictures, because why wouldn't we? So you will have read within the document the Plymouth Art Weekender was back for this year, which is fantastic. We have indeed missed it from our cultural calendar. It was last here in 2020. And all credit to the Visual Arts Plymouth committee and team who secured those funds and made that happen. So we had over 60 venues and locations showcasing more than 100 different artists and exhibitions and performances. I'm pleased to say some of these were in outdoor spaces, in public spaces. This is the Scrap Store in Stonehouse that participated. Thank you, Hannah. Next slide. You will have seen we activated Old Town Street, and we coincided that with sort of opening of that space as well, with some light-based work. We've worked with Still Moving before, and they always bring a real element of surprise and sort of curiosity for people in that space. Next slide, please. We had some fun as well, and lots of nooks and crannies that had things in, which was really important to us, and different types of art form as well were kind of represented throughout. Next slide, please. Royal William Yard was activated with a whole array of artists, which was fantastic, and again, enabling different art forms to be represented there. Next slide, please. And we situated this alongside a number of other things that were happening in the city. So this is from New Contemporaries in the Mirror Gallery at the Arts University of Plymouth, but that was also hosted at the University of Plymouth and cast as well, partnership with the Box. So we were able to situate that kind of public offer with a more a site-specific programme as well. Next slide, please. Hopefully some of you saw the activation of St Luke's, which looks a little different here, but was absolutely fantastic as a venue, and again was part of a wider piece of work, Jeremy Deller's work around acid brass. So really seeing spaces used in a different way with different audiences coming into them as well. Thank you, next slide. And some public spaces which we always hope to create that kind of encounter element, and some live work being produced. So that beautiful artwork was produced in situ during the weekend by some of our amazing street artists in the city. Next slide, please. And next slide, I think, is it. So just a little flavour there for you to give a sense of the many, many things we could have spoken about, but the impact that we're having.
Do we have any more before questions from members? No? Victoria's shaking her head. Thank you. Good. Lauren.
Thank you, Chair. I had a really brilliant time at the Plymouth Art Weekend, like running around the city, encountering like weird, wonderful art in unexpected and expected places. It was really fantastic. So big thanks to everyone involved in making that happen. I'm also really pleased. I'm going to pick up on summer sessions, particularly in this question, to hear that grassroots performance slots are coming next time. I've raised that previously, and I think it's really, really important because we have such a rich music scene here. It's great to see that's going to be celebrated. On the free tickets, I wondered, is that number of 300, is that per gig or per the season? Also, what is the mechanism for disadvantaged groups to claim those tickets? How was the take-up last year? And finally, you know, we've heard about how much we need to treasure and support culture. And I'm just wondering whether how appropriate it is and whether councillors should be a leading example in paying for culture and not receiving free tickets.
No, of course it's not actually. So I think Summer Sessions was kind of a legacy of MTV Crashes, if you remember, and with the MTV Crashes model, the ticket prices weren't commercial; they were held to about £5, but we had a significant subsidy to allow that to happen. It was really unsustainable. So the model is different from a starting point. So you know it's great. We have artists that people have to travel to see, but there is a commercial model, so that's a reality. And the business model, I mean, you know, this outfit, Live Nation, Covent Taylor, they are the biggest, and you know that brings with it a certain nature of an organisation you work in. It's very commercial, so I think we're really keen to make sure that, and they are too, that it doesn't just land from Mars, and that there is some element of equity, fairness, and sort of I guess community engagement with that process. And last year was the first year, and we achieved some things, and we want to do more. And you'll know better than me, but the model of these events is that they generally plan to be a loss leader in the first years, and then they get to a break-even model. So I think we're on that journey. So they did exactly what they thought they would do last year. They provided us some tickets, and I think actually we ended up with a whole lot more than that, because you know, they're obviously in their early stages wanting to get proof of concept. So last year went really well. We're having a conversation this year. So I think we're at an earlier stage where I think they will provide us some tickets, and we can do something with them as we want to. Last year we provided those to some of the residents who were impacted, and some of our care leaver groups, and other community organisations, and a lot of that was done through engagement with members. So there is an opportunity to do more of that. Hannah will perhaps speak to this better than me, but certainly from the city's music community, there's a desire that that event is also providing a platform for up-and-coming artists, and I think we spoke about it yesterday. In fact, I think 2 artists had the opportunity this year to get on, and I think Hannah would like it with the music to be more, as would we, and we're going to have a conversation with the Live Nation team in January about this year and our aspirations within, see if we can push that model further and get more opportunity. So I think I think the numbers were where they wanted them to be. It's not where they were this year. Is not a sustainable level. They have to get it to a higher level. So they've had a longer leading time to announce it this year. So I think they will play ball with us. So if we want a large amount of free tickets past their break even to do something for our communities, that they're willing to do that. And I think we will have conversations with our elected members and our partners about how best to distribute those. So I don't know if that kind of answers entirely your question, but Hannah might want to say something about where the music industry is, about these things that come in from land as opposed to the grassroots. And it's a difficult space to kind of occupy because they are pulling and pushing in different directions.
I mean, I guess just the thing to add for me is that there's a difference between audience engagement and sector engagement. And so what we're really looking at doing is saying the audiences are building for that, and that's fantastic, and that absolutely we should have best quality music in the city and available to people on their doorstep, 100%. But it is not always a given that that benefit reaches the sector. And so that grassroots element that you've quite rightly identified is a real passion for us and the team to do more. Now, that is not an easy negotiation when you're dealing with the largest provider in the world. But I think it really should be, one of our core principles to say, so we appreciate it can't happen in year one, but when can we get to a point where that kind of benefit is coming back into the sector? So we've laid out a few of the ideals, which we have sourced from conversations directly with the sector about what would be most beneficial. I think it's fair to say that none of them have been written off, but it's going to take a bit more pushing to understand exactly how and when and sort of pin that down rather than just an aspirational hope. So that's our kind of task really for the next year, to make sure some of those ambitions are realised.
Yeah, sorry, I sounded like I was being sleepy-shouldered, but actually this falls in Councillor Hayden's portfolio. But I can segue into one of my other portfolios just to say that a large number of our foster carers use those tickets and brought some of our children that they're looking after as well. And it's another one of those kind of, which you've heard in other committees, that it's another one of our USP things that we can offer as a local authority to our foster carers, and they were very, very greatly appreciated, and it was a way of thanking our foster carers for what they do.
Thank you. Councillor Sporson.
Thank you. Yeah, we've been blessed today with so many great things to talk about in organisations. What I would like to say though is, on the slides, when we were seeing all this fantastic work that was going on, it was kind of all William Yard, the city centre, Stoke. But this is all the south of Plymouth. What's happening in the north of Plymouth?
So I guess it's just really important to reiterate that the Plymouth Art Weekend, and none of those artists get paid. So they do it freely, and the City Council doesn't fund that programme of work, although the box supports the initiative. So the artists go where they can collaborate and where they can partner. So we would love to have broader conversations with venues and locations in other parts of the city that mean we can spread it out. It has done so in previous years, and I think there's an opportunity to scale it again. But it is incumbent, I think, on us as partners to make that possible rather than the artists themselves to do that. So that's a priority for the next coming years. The Art Weekend was just one example of hundreds of cultural initiatives that are happening. Jemima and I are very aware of that, and we're working on the cultural education programme at the moment, that I think it would be fair to say that through the interview process alone, identified the sheer breadth and quality of what is already here, many of which we didn't know about, many of which we did, and that was really exciting for us. So There is a lot of work already happening. Some of that is within schools, some of that is within outreach programmes that sit with the box or the theatre. We have some reactivation of Marjohn's arts space, which is good news for the north of the city, obviously. So yes, the Weekender has some limitations because they are not paid to be in those spaces, but there's plenty of other things that are happening across the city as well that we want to keep going with.
I think it's a very, very good point. A good challenge, rather. Councillor Smith? Oh, I'm sorry, Jemima.
No, I only wanted to say that it's a conversation we have all the time, and we had this exact conversation about the Weekender, and Hannah very properly gave me exactly the same feedback that she's just said to you. But it's very much a conversation that we've said we will take away and look at, and the collaboration between the Barbican Theatre and the Quad at Marjon is an example of, getting cultural activity going in that particular area. So it's a challenge and a conversation we have all the time. Hannah quite often pushes back and said, no, there is stuff, but it's always in our mind how we can make sure that, because the kind of most significant cultural assets are in, I always think of it in constituencies, are in Sutton and Devonport, to make sure that we are spreading it out as far as we can across the rest of the city.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the box. It's something that I think we've talked about in this committee before, just in terms of how many schools have visited the box. And I know there's new updated data on this year, so just wondering if there are any that haven't yet been.
Yes, there are some but of quite a small group, I think about 14 schools. And actually, if I look down the names, most of them, I would say most of the schools in Moorview constituency, for instance, have been. And if you look at it through the breakdown of school visits in terms of the index of multiple deprivation, actually the highest number of visits are from the most deprived parts of the city. So those I know are everybody's priority. We want everybody to come to the box, of course we do, but we really want to make sure that the young people who are attending schools in the most, more deprived parts of the city are getting the chance to come, and that is happening. And I think we feel quite confident, I hope Victoria agrees with me, that maybe probably by 2026, I'm hoping that we will be able to say that every school in the city has been to the box.
I'll just second that, yes. And we did have an email earlier this week or last week with the actual stats, but sorry, I haven't got them in front of me, but I'm very optimistic that by 2026, all schools will have visited. And I think it's an ongoing piece of work, obviously, because the children are always moving on, and also working with the teaching staff to enable those children and young people to actually access the box, because that takes a lot of arranging for the schools and is a cost as well. So I think we're really very conscious of that and very mindful of that. And I think the other area which I'm really passionate about is how we get more under 5, so preschool aged children into the box, but generally accessing culture. And I think the work that Hannah and Jemima have already referenced is really looking at, amongst other things, is looking at that really early engagement, because we know how important that is in terms of a child's development.
I only wanted to add something that was just prompted by what Councillor Sproston said in the last session around home education. And I was at the box this morning, and was it you who said it about home education? Who said it? Oh, sorry. I was at the box this morning for a meeting, and I bumped into a group of parents and carers and loads of children actually who are from the home education community, and they were spending the day in the box today. And so I just thought that was worth referencing, because that's obviously another area that we want to be sure that people are coming in and enjoying the box.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Really welcome the stuff about cultural education and the creative industries plan. I think it's so important. Realistically though, given that most schools in Plymouth City Council area are now academies and therefore outside the oversight of the local authority, how realistic is it? And I'm really hoping you're going to tell me that there's been lots of take up and engagement.
So the piece of work that we're undertaking at the moment is sort of mapping that essentially rather than delivering that. It does feed off of the With Flying Colours programme that was hugely successful and worked across a wide variety of schools in the city. I actually, although there isn't, you know, the formal curriculum that we would like to see around arts and culture, which you've expressed, there is a lot of creative activity happening in schools. And actually within Plymouth, that is really true to see, and we've seen that across with the With Flying Colours programme. I would say a lot of that is down to the individual schools, the individual people putting in effort above and beyond. So of course we would want to see curriculum reform so that it is embedded and not just, you know, whether you have a great teacher or not, or whether you have the budgets or not. But I think the work that we're focusing on around cultural education as well is the out of formal education opportunities for cultural education. It doesn't have to just happen in the education settings. And what we're seeing increasingly is youth service provision, for example, using cultural interventions, creative interventions to upskill. We're seeing the Youth Hub, Emma Hewitt was talking to us about, they're doing a whole range of programmes around creative industries to kind of upskill transferable skills. So we're really interested in cultural education sort of around creativity and not just subjects, and around outside of the formal education setting and what that means for our city, at which point we just have so much data to work with, we don't know what to do with it. So I think it's a positive thing, but we would hope we would get some kind of recommendations and best practice coming out of that.
Councillor Bannerman.
Thank you, Chair. My question was around the music action plan. I was just wondering if I can glean some more information, really. I think we talked about big events on the Hoe, and we have them within Plymouth Argyle and stuff like that. But I was wondering what we're doing more for our grassroots and how we're ensuring that this is accessible to all, thinking about neurodiversity, thinking about people with disabilities, and how we're ensuring it's a community feel to our music at grassroots.
Great, yes, so perhaps a little bit of background. Obviously, the council commissioned a report in 2019 around the sort of state of music within the city. Then COVID happened, and it was pretty much null and void before we started, because obviously the scene changed quite substantially. So what we did was take a slightly different approach, was to establish a range of music ambassadors who were from the sector, in the sector, to really understand what the data was showing us, to really understand what some of the challenges were, and not make assumptions around what we need. The music action plan is based on the music diplomacy strategy, which is a 13-point structured plan for cities who want to make their cities music cities. It's advised for local authorities, and it's used all across the world. And so each year across those 13, we look at which ones we're prioritising. So that is anything from venues to education to the visitor sector. So there's a whole spectrum in there, which I think covers some of what you've described. This isn't just about venues or gigs. This is about all those other things that sit around a music ecosystem. So the Music Action Plan does pick up on some of those elements, and we sort of prioritise them each year. It is a challenge because there are a lot of venues that have gone to the wall nationally, not just in the city, and which is a national challenge. There are national conversations about how these large arena and stadium events actually do put money back into the industry, and that is an ongoing debate, let's say. And so I don't think we have a kind of one-trick answer here. What is really powerful, and I'm very proud of, is the fact that we host, and I know, Jemima, you came to the last one, a quarterly music forum that now sees 30 to 40 people coming together to talk about what is going on, what is needed, and how they help each other. And that is anything from promoters to venues to artists and to sound teams. It's a whole spectrum, at which we also have the pavilions and home parks. So there's a wider conversation, and there is a much more coherent voice coming through about what we need and what we need to do about it, which is what drives the action plan. So we're pushing on all of those fronts at the moment. There's no one funding pot that supports that, and that is a challenge, and that's where we need to get a little inventive about how we make sure money is flowing in the right direction, I'd say.
Can I ask a quick supplement?
Yeah.
So you talk about the 13 categories. What category did we choose last year? What outcome have we got, and what we're looking forward to next year?
That's all on. I can share those if that's useful as well. They're on our website. They're published. But so we focused on grassroots music venues last year. So we enabled a number of venue owners to go to Music Day to actually look at best practice, how they make their venues more accessible. We also hosted a funding event with the Arts Council's Grassroots Music Fund, so that more venues could apply, and we've had a couple of submissions go in since, which is great. So some very practical kind of, here's some money, how do you do it? Here's some best practice, how do you do it? So we focused quite a bit on venues. And then the other thing we focused on was trying to open up new spaces for gigs and opportunities. So we've activated things like the Tin Side. We've worked within the city centre to have a bit more busking happening. And I'm really pleased to say that our partners in the sort of city centre company and waterfront partnership have included music on the billing now on, you will have seen pretty much every event and every stage that's there. And that's in addition to the conversations for the summer sessions. So we tried to pick a couple of focuses each year. Last time it was venues and sort of opening up spaces. We're interested next year to turn a little bit more to the artists and musicians themselves. They're a harder nut to crack. So the type of interventions, but we're talking with organisations like PRS and Music Union, so that often there are opportunities available they're just not taking up or they're just not aware of. So we're trying to make that information flow a bit more readily direct to the artists.
Thank you. If you wanted to send that to Hannah,
Great.
it can be disseminated. Thank you so much. Councillor McCarthy, final word on this matter.
Yeah, really, really quick one. Really great report. Really enjoyed listening to you. I think I want to step back a tiny bit. Councillor Smith made a point around attendance at the box, and we heard in the previous session how the National Marine Park are utilising teacher-based visits to the National Marine Aquarium to generate and foster sort of further visits and engagement going forward. And I know the National Marine Aquarium have done that for a number of years themselves, and that's really an effective part of their education programme. Is that something that happens with the box? Do you have sort of teacher days where they come in without or with their own children, without their students? And do you do a similar sort of thing for home educators? Because again, I'm aware that the National Marine Aquarium do that.
So thank you for the question. Yes, the box works directly with teachers as well as the school children who come. So yes, there are lots of resources on our website, so teachers can do a self-guided tour with their students and have the questions. But we have some sort of, I wouldn't call them inset days per se, but there are opportunities for teachers to come in and hear from staff and see what we're doing. I think it is an area that we probably need to be doing more work on, but it is something that definitely was being done in the previous iteration of the box in Plymouth Museum and Art Gallery. And I think we are directly working with teachers, we're directly working with the university. So there are lots of different ways, and I think what we need to find out more about is what teachers actually need to make those visits possible. And quite often we work with facilitators. Some of those people have a teaching background, but they will facilitate the visit for those children and young people.
I wanted to add that once this mapping work is done for the Cultural Education Partnership, we're going to have a kind of launch event, aren't we? That we're going to invite, representatives of MATs and teachers and all the rest of it too, so that once we know, working on the information that we get from the mapping exercise and what we're going to do, we want to have an event where we kind of raise awareness of the fact that the Cultural Education Partnership exists and what we're planning to do. So that's another route into those people.
Thank you. Yes, it was really sort of about getting decision makers in that I was kind of intrigued about. So that's really good. Thank you.
Have you finished questions of everyone? If so, can I come in at the end? Or if not, can I come in at the end? It's not about the topic we're on though, so I just wondered if you're in the flow of questions. All right, well, can I just say couple of things just to close, if that's all right? So, three. One, as I said earlier, the talent of the people we've got here, either side of me, but also the commitment of our cabinet member and her absolute passion for this agenda. I think we're very lucky, and to have you know, Hannah and Victoria is very, very fortunate to have the calibre. Two things I just was thinking about that we could have put in the report perhaps, and have just come to my mind. One is the role of culture directly in regeneration, and we talk about it a lot and have always talked about it. But we recently hosted, and Hannah spoke about it last time with city centre programmes and the like. But we just hosted the Homes England board down last week before. So we had their, I think about 35 of them, it was a cast of thousands. But we had their national non-exec board and their exec leadership. And it's really interesting when they're looking to make £100 million investment in a place, culture isn't an aside, it is absolutely at the centre, because people don't live in houses, they live in places. And the role of culture in creating places that people want to live, and then that links back to if you've got 7,000 jobs that you have to fulfil, people, again, they don't just go for a job, they go for a place in a community. So just to kind of remind ourselves that this isn't a soft add-on, it's at the heart of kind of what we do. And you can't do regeneration, you can't do housing without this stuff, and it's been behind our success. And then the other point I just wanted to pull out was that culture gets us into national places and national PR and national conversations that other things can't do. And there are, you know, all of the three people have been on national stages, been written about in national journals, national newspapers, national conferences. We'd never get into those spaces but for that. And if you look at some of the programmes next year, nationally significant things. So it's just saying, whilst there is that incredibly profound grassroots work, there's also, you know, if we are successful in getting a very large sum of money from Homes England, which we are very hopeful, and we'll see where we end up, I can guarantee you it's this conversation that has facilitated and enabled that. Because, you know, so it's just, I suppose it's just saying what we know, which is this isn't just about, you know, the community, the kind of the grassroots. This is also about enabling some massive regeneration conversations with huge money that we wouldn't be able to do without that cultural angle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for far too long, things like culture have been seen as a bit of a bolt-on. Quite the opposite. They are a driver, and we certainly get that here in Plymouth. But again, another fantastic agenda item. I'm really pleased. Lovely to see you again, Victoria. And Hannah, thank you so much for coming. We are to note the report, certainly noted. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, David. You've been through all of these matters. You can stay if you wish for the next one. Thank you. I'll give you just a moment to leave. Thank you. Thank you so much, members. Next two agenda items will be quite swift. Work programme. So Hannah, did you want to lead on this, please?
Sorry. So following a meeting with the chair and vice chair, we've updated the work programme since it was published, and the following items are now due for the 12th of February 2025. An update on the Plymouth plan, and an update on the habitat banking vehicles in Chelsea Meadow, just because you haven't had an update on those for very long, but they might come via email. And then in addition, we're going to look at future skills strategy. Speaking to the chair, you've heard a lot about the need for skilled people in Plymouth for the future. And we'll look to tie in, the leader mentioned during one of his items about supporting care leavers with their CVs. So we'll try to incorporate that in there rather than have it as a separate agenda item. And then we'll have the draft NZAP and the visitor plan, and potentially look to just reschedule the creative industries plan because that agenda is starting to look so big. And then we'll be contacting South West Water to confirm the future plans meeting on the 2nd of April. I will share a copy of the work programme with members tomorrow, or this evening, but we also had a discussion around the number of items on the to be scheduled that related to transport, sustainable transport, and speaking to the team, we and the chair, we're going to do a transport item that covers all types of transport in hopefully the first meeting of the next year. So, but we'll give officers a heads up, and yeah, that will look at all types of transport.
Yeah, that's across the spectrum, and that we anticipate being in July.
Yes.
So the new schedule will hopefully be populated date-wise, but looking at all the things we wanted to discuss, we've just jigged around the work programme. So that'll come to you tomorrow, and I hope if there's any queries, please come back through Hannah. That would be very helpful. So grateful if you can note that, and then on to the last agenda item, which is tracking decisions. Anything you wish to raise, Hannah,
Chair,
or any members?
If we could get that site visit to Tyneside scheduled, that would be great. If everyone's in agreement.
Yeah, Hannah made a note of that. It's very much up to the team. Kareem's here, so that will be raised and try to schedule that in. But I suspect that won't be until certainly the first quarter of next year. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And then that brings us to tracking decisions. Any questions in respect to tracking decisions? No, thank you so much. Well, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Thank you so much. It was quite a long meeting, 3 hours today. Really appreciate it, but there was some really positive stuff discussed today. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.